for example, when a sand pile is self-organized, I can take the location of one grain of sand. It gives me a lot of information where other grains of sand are likely to be. When it's avalanching, I lose that. And that's the kind of entropy you're talking about. One of the things we were interested in when we were talking about entropy is, why is entropy going up with phenomenological richness? So when people are in psychedelic states, they have incredible richness of their experience, but entropy is going up massively because the standard ways in which the brain is mutually talking to itself are being broken apart, right? That's where the weirdness comes from. And then part of our answer was, that's fascinating. The gods have always been ethno-cultural, and money, like, is there a connection between this and the emergence? Because it's around the same time you start to get the idea of a universal deity that is not bound to a particular cultural, ethnic origin. Is money the thing that starts to get us to think about collective intelligences, collective agency, independent of our cultural, ethnic allegiances? It's a fourth way in which it might have helped the Axial Revolution. You were both arguing, hey, look, it's transnational, it's transcultural, it's like in the way it operates. And I was going, oh, that's really important. And making that so practically obvious to people that it's insinuating into their day-to-day economic exchanges. Think about that.
John's an excellent source of interpersonal advice. I won't
Only
get into a
because
bunch of details, but
only because I've screwed up so many
well,
times.
no, but that's where learning comes from. For if you can learn from your mistakes and have humility about them, because it's easy to not do that. And if you've never made mistakes, when I tutored really sheltered kids, I would sometimes pity their naivete and admire their innocence because they'd get to not suffer like maybe I did or other people I knew did, but then they also didn't know why things were the way they were. But if you can go through and emerge like without being destroyed by the fire, those are some of the best perspectives and stuff. And yeah,
Yeah, well,
John's a deep, soulful man, I would say.
uh, one of the wisest people I ever met in my life in person said to me, don't become intimately involved with anybody who's never tasted grief,
Mm.
because they don't know what, they don't understand their humanity. They don't understand why certain structures are in place. And that's been really good advice for me. I
Mm.
tended to shy away from people that I get a sense, like Robert said, have been extremely sheltered,
Mm.
cloistered even. Mm. And
Yeah.
one of my concerns about, because I've watched it happen, is I believe the academic world is becoming self-insular like that.
Oh,
Becoming,
so much.
yeah.
Yeah. The reward mechanisms don't really reward sincerity or depth or having your behaviors match your espoused image and stuff like that. I was talking to Rick Rapetti one time about my future, and he was like, go into theology. Those people are much
Yeah.
more loving than the philosophy departments and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I'd never really even looked at it kind of the way he said. Um,
And
yeah.
I do think, well, first of all, there's a revolution happening in theology, because it's really dealing with, finally, really deeply dealing with the meaning crisis, issues around wisdom and virtue and science. And I do think theology is, I keep saying it, it is the discipline of the future. Um, so it's good recommendation. And Rick is, of course, very wise. So a good advice from a wise person should be taken
Yeah.
into account.
I like PE fit, the idea of like you have to fit with your environment. And if you're like a cuddly person that likes warmth and virtue, even if you like logic and argument, it might be better to go with the people that are into that. And I agree with you too. It's like the more economic power we have, the more issues like meaning become salient because these super salient things are running amok in the collective environment and stuff. And so understanding, and you like might have to work less. I mean, I think I would love if people had the aporia of like, oh, I wish I'd work only 4 hours a day or something. But then that has a whole struggle of like, oh, I've never had that much creative freedom, and I'm used to having people tell me what to do or having a very well-defined role, and then like going, oh, I'm kind of retired now.
Well, I'm facing that at the end of this year.
Yeah.
I'm formally retiring from the university and going emeritus, so that I can do exactly what you said, Rob. I would like to have it that I work 4 hours a day. And
Nice.
the rest of the day is I read. In Piper's sense, or Pieper, however he pronounces his name, I read at leisure. That I
Mm.
have that time that is devoted to the cultivation of spirit, that I think is really, really important and lacking. So I'm looking forward to that a lot.
I am too, actually. I'm excited to see what comes of that for you. Um, I I did this exercise. I didn't even know what manifestation was at the time, but this was late 2016. I took a solo trip to Hawaii for New Year's.
Oh, yeah.
And I was making this career transition, like just basically starting my own business, leaving like corporate finance and starting my own thing. And I was trying to figure out like what life, where was I headed, basically. And so I was posing this question to myself that if money were no object, how would I spend my average day,
Mhm.
hour by hour, you know?
Mhm.
And so obviously it's 24 hours, you sleep 8, you've got 16 left. And I said that I would work for 3 hours, play for 3 hours, work being whatever my professional money-making interest is, play being just unstructured game, could be with your kids, whatever the thing is, try to have some fun. 3 hours of reading, because that's always been an ambition of mine, is I guess kind of like John, to just consume a lot and learn. And then 3 hours of physical activity, so working out or walking or hiking. And then 4 hours of just free time, unstructured, eat, brush your teeth, all that.
Socialize and stuff
Yeah,
like that. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And again,
yeah.
it's not formulaic. It's just like a guideline. So it's like kind of your average day.
Yeah, that's how I see my day. Um, I want so that I can always do like I have different ecology as a practices routine, anywhere from 15 minutes because I'm very rushed to an hour and a half to 2 hours when I get to do all I want. And when I'm retired, I want it to be the full ecology every morning,
Mhm.
right? And then, as you said, read. Probably then I'll go to work for 4 hours and then study for the next three or so. For me, study mixes play and reading
Mhm.
together because that's how I play. And yeah, that's how I plan to run my days. So
That's beautiful. I'm sure you'll love it and you'll discover a lot in that.
well, I mean, I'm still going to be teaching. I've got the lectern. We just got $100,000 grant to do a very deep study. I'm involved in another Templeton grant that just we it was just one. Like I've got lots of research. I got books on the go. Like I'm writing. I've got papers coming into publication. Um, it's actually a pretty golden time for me, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. It's because being a beast of burden is like a necessary evil. You don't want people to not like to contribute to things that they just don't find intrinsically rewarding, because I think society just crumbles if that were truly the case. But the that is the only way is also just as tragic. They have this idea of job crafting. Have you ever heard of that, John? So job crafting is kind of sweet because it's a meaningfulness construct, and it's the areas within what your role is that you have to actually exert agency or creativity. And so you could say like, "Oh, I'm an accountant, but I really wish I was an artist." But maybe you write really creative emails, or maybe you make a PowerPoint that has a compelling nature,
Wow.
or it can be even as simple as like taking your coffee break and, using that wisely or in a service to yourself rather than just like the task at hand or whatever. And like I think there's like life crafting as well. So like
Yeah.
just being able to say like, okay, what do I want to do with what is the telos of my life? Um is kind of excellent. But I mean, literally, that's what you were doing too, Robert, is trying to like existentially imagine your future and what would be like the best outcome. It's some physicalists don't even believe that the imagination can do that. They go, no, it's all literal, and positivism minimizes that existential desire to plan one's life and stuff.
Yeah, there's something I didn't learn this until years later, and this well, was actually during an ayahuasca ceremony, but that it seems like reality really responds to unequivocal choices. When you like really choose a path and commit to it, and you're not equivocating, oh, plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, which is obviously, very natural to do. We all want the safety
Mm.
net, we all want the backup plan, we all want the training wheels, whatever. But there's something about really going for it and like putting it all on the line and putting your whole heart and soul and blood and sweat and tears into something that causes the universe to reorganize itself in some crazy way. And I didn't know at the time, by the way, mechanically what I was going to do whatsoever. It was just an outcome I was trying to reverse engineer towards. And then all these things happened, like I got into Bitcoin and the writing became popular and the podcast started and like it just happened that now I do live wherever I want. I control my time. I've got financial freedom and it's amazing. And I can trace it back to 10 years ago doing basically a manifestation practice without knowing I was doing it. So, and again, I don't know. I'm not saying that that's how it works. I'm just saying that's what happened for
No,
me.
there's a
And
lot of reason that's true because um, if you're dabbling in a bunch of things, you don't get that focus. And like John says in his series, like we don't really know what it'll be like on the other side of those things. They're really leaps of faith. They might have an intuition, or you're moving towards an image or something like that. That's why having no debt is really good. Having like the ability to trust people around you or not being super committed to like bad things. If you have like had you tried all that with like a meth addiction, it probably wouldn't have worked as well and stuff like that. But like that's how I met John. Literally, I traveled 1,500 miles to Michigan to try and work in a graduate program, and I could have never done that if I was a coward or if I had a bunch of debt. I was like, no, I you only live once. And the nice thing about that too is even if you fail, you know what it was like to try. If you're only
Mhm.
ever wishing you did more, then you don't get to encounter, oh, that was horrible. I actually thought I wanted that. Or the best version is you go, oh, now I have what I wanted. That little
Mhm.
inkling of a desire, blossomed into this whole future self that I admire and I'm happy I am and stuff like that. Yeah, which to a very rational person I think can seem like woo maybe, but it
Yeah,
makes perfect sense to
but I
me.
don't think it is woo at all. And I would interpret what you're saying in like Telebian language. It's about fragility or anti-fragility. And so if you have a lot of debt or you have addictions or you have really any other dependencies, you're fragile to time, right? Because those things compound against you over time. Whereas if you have the opposite and you have, savings, emotional sovereignty, independence, generally speaking, then you're anti-fragile to time. Those things compound in your favor over time. And so the option landscape expands when you have the latter and it contracts when you have the former. And so you could call it woo if you want, but I think there's a lot of almost like mathematical kind of rigor behind it when you look at it through a financial lens.
No, that's beautiful. Well, you even went beyond the financial. You went into the existential and the affective and the all sorts of things. And that's why skills are so interesting to develop, especially when it seems like I would just love to be an influencer or I would just love for people to find me beautiful. If you actually like go dig and build up some skills that you think will transform you and then reemerge in the social world or whatever, that also it pays dividends because skills that are complex that are valued to you or to others or both take a lot of time to learn. Have you seen in the news all these corporations are firing their workers because they think chatbots can replace their workforce? And
Mm.
now all these CEOs are trying to rehire people. And just like the research on the amount of it takes usually like 6 to 12 months to train up someone to where they're productive in a big complex organization. And you're like burning all the bridges, all sorts of like implicit, tacit, and like valuable knowledge leaves and never returns. And yeah, the idea of like short-term gains, sacrificing like existential depth is like it could be worse than the 2007 crash, which was like just terrible to watch. Um, yeah, no, I love that. That was profound. What do you think a lot in terms of time? Because I think time is really hard to philosophize well about.
Well, I don't know. I guess look at most things through the lens of money, obviously. It's also connected to language. As Vervaeke and I spoke about previously, I look at like literacy, numeracy, money, like the three primary languages, literacy being the language of the subjective, numeracy being the language of the objective, and money being the language of the transjective.
Mhm.
But money is often identified with time, right? Everyone knows, oh, time is money. It's obviously an instrument we use to trade our time with one another in a commercial sense, in the sense that you go to work and trade your time solving other people's problems for money, and then you take that money back into the marketplace and other people spend their time solving your problems, making your food or making your shoes or whatever the thing is. So I mean, I look at it that way. There's also, I guess you get more philosophical about it. Again, I draw on Taleb a lot. It's like time reveals all things. Time is the judge of all things. Time is the test of all things. And you're almost saying like, does this thing hold up against the test of reality over time? Well, that is the thing that is good. And if it does not, then it's not like the goodness of the thing collapses. And so I don't know. I don't know if I have a direct answer to that question, but those are
No,
just
that was
some
wonderful. That
of the
was that
things.
was very profound, I think, because like when you say time unfolds, you're kind of saying like all of these higher order interdependent phenomenon put the pressure on your claims, and then if they're bullshit, if they're false, then they
Yeah.
crumble. If they're well aligned, if they're virtuous, then they echo forward. There was actually, it took like 75 years in organizational psychology to discern between your outcome and your effort. That's
Mhm.
so easy to confuse those two when, especially if you're in a very like self-willing kind of cultural framework to go like, no, we're going to measure performance and we're going to measure it by outcomes. But outcomes are funny because a lot of those are out of your control. There's like secondary forces that can make the outcomes not match. You can be doing kind of a virtuous thing that otherwise just isn't ready for its time, or is has some other elements like bad luck or whatever. One time I didn't get to podcast with this guy Michael Chase who wrote the Philosophy as a Way of Life translations for Pierre Hadot because he didn't like John because John liked Jordan Peterson, and he only learned that between saying yes and missing a meeting. So it was like just bad luck made it not happen more than and like his little bit of like weirdness because I don't know. Um, Correlation is not causation, and friendships are not the same as distinct beings sometimes. But it's I love that though because like yeah, yeah, it's hard to put into words what you just
I
said,
guess
but
the other frame, just to throw it out there and then I'll be quiet. It's basically entropy, right? It's thermodynamics that the entropy increases over time. That's how we discern, activities that are going forward in time versus backward in time. It's easy to crack the egg. It's hard to put it back together. So these with entropy increases over time, that's what's testing the structure of whatever you've built. So if you've built the aqueduct and you've built it well according to good architectural principles, it will survive the entropy and the variability of time and weather and earthquakes or whatever else it may be. Whereas if it's poorly structured, then it won't. So, and I think that's what we're ultimately trying to, no matter what we're trying to build, we want it to survive entropy because if it doesn't survive entropy, then what's the point, right? We've wasted our time.
John, you write about entropy in your flow to mystical experience paper a little bit. How do you
Yeah.
conceive of as entropy? Is it very similar to what he's saying, or in psychological terms, or
Um, well, the way I mean, the problem, part of the difficulty is the historical naming of a thermodynamic principle and an informational principle with the same term, and they don't mean exactly the same thing, but they're not totally disconnected. So it's very easy for people to confuse those two together. Um, so we didn't, I mean, at some level, something like the free energy principle is directed towards entropy in the thermodynamic sense that Robert is talking about. And then you understand part of the function of autopoiesis is to dissipate entropy in, in in a way that you know uh, allows for the longevity and of the individual, the propagation of the species, etc. But what we concentrated on is we concentrated on the idea more about something like the mutual predictability between events, mutual information, which is much a better measure when you're trying to see if there's something going on, cognitively in the brain. Because although it's a physical measure, you're starting to measure information exchange relationships, which starts to bridge into the cognitive. So that's the kind of entropy we were talking about. Now, what its ultimate ontological relationship is to thermodynamics, I think it's probably mediated through something like the free energy principle, something like that. But we didn't try and solve that problem because we were interested in a different problem, which is if entropy, even at a cognitive level, because order can just mean, like as Robert said, our structures degrade. It can mean um, a wider probability distribution. So that some people think that there's no force of entropy because all entropy means is there's more ways for an egg to be broken than to be together, and that's all that happens, just probabilistically. But then they have to give reality to probability. There's that. Mutual information is definitely a kind of disorder. So, for example, when a sand pile is self-organized, I can take the location of one grain of sand. It gives me a lot of information where other grains of sand are likely to be. When it's avalanching, I lose that. And that's the kind of entropy you're talking about. And the thing we're interested in is one of the things we were interested in when we were talking about entropy is why is entropy going up with phenomenological richness? So when
Hmm.
people are in psychedelic states, they have incredible richness of their experience, but entropy is going up massively because, right, there's a lot of things, the standard ways in which the brain is mutually talking to itself are being broken apart, right? That's where the weirdness comes from. And then part of our answer was, well, what's interesting is, again, you shouldn't think of, you shouldn't think this in a simple linear fashion. And what we proposed was the entropy fluency hypothesis, which is the idea that what some entropy is doing is exactly what happens in the sand pile, right? You get the entropy that breaks up an unstable structure and affords a new structure emerging. And that what you're actually getting is we're basically, and then that's the cognitive continuum. Fluency is sort of unconscious insight, and then we have conscious insight, and then we have a cascade of insights and flow, and then we have a cascade of flows and mystical experience, and that's the cognitive continuum. And so we said there's times in which entropy is not something that is indicating that the system is breaking down. The system is actually exapting that entropy in order to evolve its cognitive fittedness, which is what we propose that the psychological measure of fluency is actually a measure of fittedness, which we also take to be relevance realization. So sorry, that was the basic connection.
no, that was, don't be sorry. That was wonderful. Yeah, because there's this group flow paper, and they use kind of not the greatest language. They go from idling to acceleration to flow to afterglow. And
Yeah,
like if you have a frame, then the breakdown of it would look kind of bad if you looked at it in isolation. Like, oh no, the bridge is breaking.
yeah,
This is run for the door, Indiana Jones or whatever.
Yeah.
But what's happening is it's freeing up resources and so that a new
Yeah.
structure can appear. Um, and it's if it's doing it, I mean, it's doing it in an environment, so it's not doing it like with no feedback or whatever. Gravity is happening with the sand pile, or other
Yeah.
ideas in the neuro biology of the being are like floating up, or new connections are starting to be made and stuff like that. So, um, oh, that's super interesting. Yeah, thanks. That's a
It reminded
multi-level.
me, it reminded me, John, I don't know if it's connected, but the frame breaking versus the frame remaking
Yeah,
process.
and we made use of that language in the paper, what's fundamentally going on. And we proposed, I mean, we're basically making use of Stefan and Dixon's proposal because they were able to see this increase in entropy and then dropping below the starting point of entropy when you went through the aha. And we said, they didn't use the language of frame breaking and frame making, but we were saying, well, it matches up to what they're saying very closely. And then you get and then Tobolensky and Reber had already made a very good argument. Well, an insight is just a fluency spike. It's like your fittedness on your environment just suddenly, and, and you want to do that with an insight. You feel like your mind is doing that. Your optimal grip has improved, or you didn't have an optimal grip, and you've now oriented in such a way that you have an optimal grip. So the cognitive continuum paper, I mean, it's kind of an argument for adding two more E's, which is that cognition is inherently evolutionary, not necessarily biological speciation, but it's using evolutionary mechanics. And insofar as it's doing that, it's also exaptive. It's taking something and repurposing it to use it for something else.
Hmm.
That's why
Yeah,
analogical reasoning is so good. No, go ahead, Robert.
and just one small thing. I interpret that oftentimes through like the map territory metaphor,
Mm,
in that, if you have just the static paper map, it gives you one kind of resolution. But again, it's not mapping to changes in the territory over time.
yeah,
Whereas if you have a much more high resolution map, like a GPS, it's breaking and remaking all the time, right? So it's like adapting to changes in the territory. And so there's your spectrum, right? It's like
yeah.
where do you want to land on that spectrum?
Well, that was the idea. We were proposing complexification that is increasingly coupled to the complexity of reality, and so you're evolving your cognitive evolvability rather than evolving a static trait that is fixed to a particular location. It's interesting because Robert and Sevilla and I got talking a bit about that, and I was comparing European maps that are static and fixed, and we want them closed and done, to Polynesian maps that are used in wayfaring, and everybody's expected to constantly contribute to that and add to it and make it grow and enrich it.
Mm.
And so it's a much more dynamic kind of mapping. Ingold talks about that in his work on wayfaring. Um, and then this goes towards a lot of the work that Dan Chiappi and I are doing. We just published a paper called Rationality on Orientation, on how being oriented is the fundamental thing you need before you can do anything else, before you can start any computation, argumentation. And the idea of, orientation, connection, navigation, and narration. Uh, Narration, I argue, evolves out of, when we're tracking in navigation, we have to keep track of our tracking so that we can coordinate with each other, and that's how narration evolves. And so that Ingold says, yeah, but all of those things that we sort of separate out, the map making, the orientation, right, the navigation, the narration, they're all actually organically part of this wayfaring. And then we argue, of course, in a 4E fashion, that the brain takes sensory motor wayfaring and repurposes it for cognitive and existential meaning making.
Mm.
That's why we use journey metaphors and quest metaphors,
Mm.
and orientation metaphors and connection metaphors and spatial metaphors and movement metaphors. In fact, if you take all of those metaphors and gestures out of our thinking when we're trying to talk about anything other than concrete sensory motor behavior, it becomes very impoverished, and our ability to process information degrades very rapidly.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, because construal is very tricky. Like it's a boring topic in psychology. Have you heard of construal theory, Robert?
No, I've
So
not.
it's pretty famous. There's these people, Trope and Lieberman. And a really easy example is like changing a light bulb on like a high fixture. You have to physically enact it. You have to like twist and bring the ladder over. Maybe you have to socially enact it. You have to get someone to hold the ladder because you're nervous. You have to like figure out like which store to go to buy the light bulb. So now you're like imagining and planning and doing all this kind of like abstract reasoning. And then you can even philosophize about it and get even more abstract. But like our to live well, we're doing these all the time. And at organizations, we have people that are doing the physical processes. There's people zoomed out that are like planning. There's people that are in between those two that are managing between the two. They're putting information up to the executive level and they're bringing ideas down and they're so it's a really complex integrated thing when it works well. And if you have missing levels of construal and you're an academic, let's say, or you're theorizing, then it really gets like weird and circular and you know, like, oh, I don't believe in contemplation or symbols, or I don't think the body's important, or whatever the thing is, or sociality, um and they're really nice. So they even use the distance language in this paper that I have up. So they have the self, the nearby, the experience, and the temporally right now. And then you can construe away from all those. You can have from experience, you can go to the hypothetical, right? So you're not bound by the bottom up. You could say, what could be better, and get into the hypothetical. If you're super Aristotelian and you're like, oh, it's just or empirical or positive or whatever, you can miss that there's alternatives that don't exist yet in your field, but that could be implemented from theory and then feed into virtuous activity. Same thing with like the self. If you start to construe, oh, I'm a part of a family, I'm a part of a romantic relationship, I'm a part of two different work teams, and I have, you know, my membership at the chess club. And oh, what if I got the chess club to go do something at the movie center with the dance club? And you can start to construe socially away from the immediate self. And then the same thing with place. You can go like, oh, well, what ideas could I bring in from the Netherlands or from England or from China or things like that. So it's not just the physical locality. And then again, like the past and the future, it's like, oh, you know, what was I doing 10 years ago? Or what could I be doing 10 years from now? Or what did Plato and Socrates, what might they imagine the situation as? And you can start to like temporally, socially, conceptually, and physically have a really, really rich kind of worldview or whatever to enact your agency and your identity and stuff from.
I would point out, and Robert used it several times, that the central metaphor behind this is moving away, it's wayfaring from the self. Like it's like, okay, explain your theory and don't use that central metaphor.
Well, and even in like Evan Thompson and Varela's autopoiesis theory, like if you lose self-reference, you go insane, kind of. And I was reading this organizational paper called Work and Being. I don't know if they were playing on Heidegger, but they were citing Varela, and I was getting excited because you don't see that a lot in that field. And the self, you can get too self-absorbed and solipsistic and stuff like that. But like if you just have no self-reference, you also kind of spin into a kind of craziness where you abstract away yourself and you're like, ah, we just need more data towers or whatever, because they've extracted away, yeah, that central locus.
I'm very interested in, I mean, first of all, many people, myself included, we argue that those levels, concrete to abstract and time, they correspond to the levels in predictive processing and relevance realization. But for me, and this is something I've tried to, I think that predictive processing on its own, but especially when it's integrated with relevance realization, it entails the indispensability of the imaginal. So all that moving away from this self is imaginal in nature. It's not merely, it's not dispensable metaphor, neither is it literally the case. It's inherently imaginal. So is the space inside your head where you move things around in a working memory. All of that is imaginal, and all of it's like really, really central to being rational. And so for me, part of what I think is what I'm trying to show is, I think, implied, perhaps even entailed, uh, construal level theory, if you ground it in predictive processing relevance realization, is that it entails the centrality, the indispensability of the imaginal to our cognition and to our rationality. And I think that's something very, very important. And Robert, you and I have sort of talked about whether or not money has that kind of an imaginal status. It's not sort of it's not part of it's not part of the physics, but it's not just purely subjective or anything like that. And so I wanted to ask you that question, Robert, if it's okay if I ask Robert a question.
This is exactly why we're here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you did a really cool. Like, first of all, I continue to be impressed how you are slowly, because that means you're doing it very carefully, which I respect, trying to work out the ontology of money, economy, things like that, and trying to ground them. Our last conversation was, what's the ontology behind all of this? And you did a really interesting mapping about literacy, numeracy, and money, and put money into the transjective. Do you think that money is therefore inherently imaginal in a powerful way? Because one of the things the imaginal does, this is Corbin's proposal, is it actually does. It is what gives us the connecting tissue beneath and between the subjective and the objective. And I'm just wondering what you think about that as a proposal.
I think it's very interesting, of course, and I'm familiar with the Imaginal through you and your work. I
Yeah,
have read some of Corban on your recommendation, also some
yeah.
of the other authors around him. James
Thomas Cheetham.
Tillman,
Hillman is there. Hillman,
Tillman.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hillman
yeah,
and Thomas Cheetham are two of the biggest.
yeah. And I don't claim by any means to be an expert in that domain, but I do like when you describe it that the imaginal, the imagination takes us away from our perception. You
Yeah,
imagine a sailboat on
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
sea, it's like
yeah,
some
yeah,
fictional world,
yeah,
but the
yeah.
imaginal is like augmenting your perception. So,
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
fighter in the cockpit with the
Yep, yep.
data
Heads up.
overlay, it's
Yeah,
telling you altitude and trajectories, like it's enhancing your perception, basically.
yeah, yeah,
And so, in that respect alone, again, not saying I know much else about the imaginal, I think, and I've proposed this to you in the past, John, as you know, like pricing as the fifth
yeah,
P of knowing, right?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, 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 yeah,
pricing is
yeah,
this
yeah,
extracranial form of cognition where we don't need to know that there was an earthquake in Chile that cut off the supply of copper to the
yeah,
market. I don't need to know about the fire in the factory. I don't need to know about all the measures that are going to resolve it, everyone's story and all you need to know is the number went up or went down, right? The price of
yeah,
copper went up. Therefore, I'm incentivized to use less or use substitutes, or if I'm a producer, I'm incentivized to produce more. So I'm incentivized through my own self-interest to participate in solving the problem, right? Which is there's less copper coming to market. And so it's augmenting your perception in that sense that it's synoptic, I guess. You would say like you're seeing through the eyes of other people just
yeah,
through a
yeah,
number, right? It's highly data compressed.
yeah.
All you know is the number went up. I don't need any of the other narrative. And I know what to do as a result. And the same is true for everyone else in the world in the copper
Yeah,
market.
I do like the proposal. Like, we didn't include it in the recent paper because we were doing the
Yeah.
four P's of knowing. That's about to be published. But I
Yeah.
do like the proposal for pricing as the fifth P, as this sort of imaginal way in which the collective intelligence of the
Mhm.
market, right, grokks patterns and then interfaces with us through that. And I mean, I'm trying to use almost religious language to talk about this, but it is. I mean, there's something inherently imaginal about the price of copper. We're not like
Right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're not saying something that's objectively the case, because it can just change, right? But
Right.
it's not arbitrary either. It seems to do something about the overall fittedness of this collective intelligence to the world and what's available and so forth.
And I would also just add here to the transjectivity aspect of
Yeah,
that. Obviously, price is where, the objective supply of goods in the world meets
yeah,
crosses the subjective
yeah,
demand.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So it's
yes.
neither objective nor subjective. It's the
And
intersection of the two.
it's also subject to niche construction. We can, of course,
Yeah.
change the environment that
Right.
changes, and we do
Well,
this
well, the
with it.
price
Yeah,
changes our actions, but also our actions change the price.
yeah, right,
And
right, right.
and so
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
always in
yeah,
this loop with
yeah,
it.
yeah,
On Wall Street, they say price is truth. It's like an ongoing discovery process.
right.
The only other thing about the imaginal that comes up for me there too is like if the imaginal is role playing, like the other example
Mhm.
you give is the kid that ties
Yeah,
around
yeah, 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 yeah,
the cape and pretends
yeah,
he's Superman, he's like
yeah,
playing a role.
yeah,
Well, what are most people role playing for in the world? Like when I
yeah,
look around the world, it's like
yeah,
everyone has a job. You're a
yeah,
professor, I'm a
yeah.
podcaster, whatever we're doing, we often identify our role, our professional role, with what we do in pursuit of money. So there is maybe
Yes,
something there from an imaginal standpoint.
that's very good. I like this. Um, One of the things I like about you, Robert, is exactly this. Um, you have a very strong take, and I mean that as a compliment, strong. I don't
Thank you.
mean it in a merely logical sense. You have a strong take on economics, and you're trying to make it philosophically rich. But a lot of people who do it, like, and I see this all over YouTube, they have a take on economics, and then they just use it as this siloed hammer that
Mm.
they sort of bash everything with. And you're the opposite. You're trying to connect it out as much as possible. And this is why I enjoy, well, I'll just be sort of a little bit crude here. I enjoy talking to you, and I often don't enjoy talking to them. Uh,
Thank you.
because they typically don't want to talk about meaning. Don't want to talk about virtue. They don't want to talk about the imaginal. They don't want to, I think they confuse. Tell me what you think about this. And Robert, Ray, I don't mean to exclude you. Right.
I'm
Well,
here.
okay.
We just
Well,
never talk about this. I have the same
yeah,
practical perspective as Robert,
yeah.
and just don't bring it up. But no, we talked for 4 hours about these very same things, and I love the core band.
Well, the comparison I want to make, and I said it's crude, so don't hang me on the comparison. But there's a people who are interested in the philosophy of economics, and then there are people who are just interested in sort of bottom line thinking.
Mm.
Um, and I find that the second group often exhibit one of the pronounced features of um, irrationality. They don't care about the process; they only care about the product,
Sure.
and they're not really interested in how the problems are being formulated. They're just yeah, but give me the answer, give me the solution, and and so this is a long way of complimenting you, Robert. I think you exhibit an appropriate kind of rationality about this. You keep stepping back, and every time I talk to you, I feel like you're stepping back more. Yeah, yeah, but how does this get formulated? What is the process? What's the ontology? How does this connect to the other things that matter to human beings? And in that sense, I think you're a little bit. I mean, that you're very much Austrian, but I also get a sense that that's got a bit of what the classical people were trying to do. Like Smith is clearly trying to do that with his.
Mhm.
It's about virtue and it's about meaning, it's about justice, it's about all these other things, and he's trying to propose an ontology. And so I just wanted to give that back to you as an observation.
Well, thank you very much. But I say this somewhat tongue in cheek, perhaps. I don't know, but every time you talk to me, I have like another 100 hours of listening to you under my belt, probably. So, a lot of the things you're thinking about and talking about in your language and your thought process, like I'm internalizing more of that. And so I really appreciate the compliment, and I am legitimately trying to do that. I've William James has this metaphor he often uses about ideas cashing out, which I'm
Yeah,
sure you're familiar with. And
yeah,
so, and then, Christ in the Bible, I think something like one quarter of his parables they're related to money. Obviously there's like the
yeah,
parable of the talents and several
yeah,
others. So there's something about that metaphorical structure that is money that gives us this very deep, intense, embodied experience of gain, of loss, of investment, of return, of, trust and betrayal and all of these things. Um, that seems to show up in money that you can't really get with many other experiences.
Well, that's
And
another dimension to you. Oh, sorry.
just to finish the thought is like, and then when I take that a step further and I get into, Lakoff and Johnson's work, Metaphors We Live By,
Yeah,
and they're talking about, target domains and source domains, it's a ratio. Then
yeah,
I'm like, oh wow, you got metaphor and literacy, which is, target domain over source domain. You have ratio and numeracy, right?
yeah.
Numerator over denominator. And then you have prices and money, which is dollars over goods or money over goods. So there are all these comparative elements and all of these structures. So money
Well,
itself is like a metaphor,
first
basically.
of all, you have to write a book on this.
I am
He
writing a
is.
book on it, actually.
Well, I'll read it and comment on it for you
I hope
if you
you'll write
want.
the forward to it. That's a request I have coming.
Okay, well, I here now publicly promise to write the foreword to your book.
Okay, because
Of
we
course,
cite you a lot. We cite you a lot.
of course, my friend, I would do that. This is something we've always talked about, but now I see how it fits in. So, because money is this imaginal cognitive prosthetic, right? It's
Yeah, great
therefore
description.
like literacy and numeracy in being a psychotechnology that we internalize into the very fabric of how we're trying to make sense of anything we're doing. It generalizes out because we've internalized it so deeply in. And
Mhm.
that's what I hear you saying here.
I think that's a great title for it, a cognitive prosthetic psychotechnology. That's
Yeah,
well, when I was originally turned on to your work, that was one of the first terms that really grabbed me was psychotechnology. And
yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, that's what money is. And it's more like literacy and numeracy. Because a
yeah,
lot of people would describe it as time, as power, as economic
yeah, yeah.
energy, and like, these are all metaphors that are useful. But when that element of it implementing itself into our brain and us thinking through it, and then it coordinating our actions at scale, that was sort of missing without that linguistic component.
Well, that's what
I
symbols do.
yeah, good, Rob.
In science, you have the dependent variable and the independent variable, and it's like A causes B. But then if you get into science, they have these moderating and mediating variables, and they have all sorts of
Mhm.
contextual factors and stuff like that. So sleep
Yes.
mediates health, or sleep creates cellular repair, right? Like A
Yep.
causes B. If you sleep, your cells will repair. But if you drink a bunch of caffeine before you sleep, that will change that relationship
Mhm.
and degrade it. Or if you meditate before you sleep, or do some strenuous activity that leaves you like in a very deeply easy to rest state, that does better sleep. So these things, and so there's this problem in economics called the double coincidence of wants. And so before money, you have to hold a bunch of stuff and you go, okay, great, I'll give you my watch if you'll give me your boots. And you go,
Mhm.
I don't want your boots. You go, okay, well, what about my hat? Or what about, I'll write you a poem. And you have to actually have something to do that. But then if you can have a ledger or a vow, right, then you can do that. And then if you can, create a stable currency, you can mediate 500 million people's activity. There's no
Mhm.
one person ledging all that down, and there are constraints and forces that can destroy that currency. But you have to trade and barter before the creation of some mutually accepted norm, which is why like salt was really valuable, not
Mhm.
only because of what it did, because everyone else wanted it. So if you're playing a video game like Diablo 2, everyone wants certain items. So if you collect those and trade away your random things for those, they have this ability to open up your future in the way that just concrete things don't. And so mediating uh, uh, 50 different types of skills and activities is like very challenging in a barter system. But if you start having a mutually agreed upon value, whether it has some intrinsic worth or it's some agreed upon thing,
Yes.
that then affords this whole opening up of complexification and integration. And it minimizes a lot of communication too, because I don't need to even know what's happening in the world. I don't need, like, it actually frees cognitive resources that you'd have to do just tracking ledgers. It's almost better than having a bunch of accountants. And the same thing with Christianity. You can go into a Christian church in England or in China or in Detroit, and you'll kind of get the same vibe. They're obviously radically different, but they're qualitatively different than like a mob hangout or whatever. They have a homogeneity within their variability that the symbol of Christ and the Virgin Mary keep overflowing into their being and structuring the norms of what those places and stuff are. And so money is symbolically acting in the economic level the same way, Christ and Mary are in the theological Christian world in some sense. They coordinate and they establish patterns of behavior that go beyond the creativity of the people involved in stuff. Like symbols
Mhm.
are amazing, yeah.
No, just to pick up on that, and I don't know as much about the theology, of course, but I'm fascinated by the cross in many respects as a symbol. One of them is the fact that it seems to represent like the intersection of different dimensions. You've got the
Hmm.
vertical, horizontal, and what you were just describing there, right? So yes, money can be whatever we choose it to be. People often describe it as a collective hallucination or a belief system, as if we could just all decide, let's use chairs as money and they would magically be money, which makes it sound purely subjective. You could call that, maybe that's the horizontal dimension. But it's not entirely true either, because there are properties that make some assets good as money and
Yeah.
some not, right? It needs to be divisible, durable, recognizable, portable, scarce, all these things. So that's more like the objective vertical dimension. And then there you go again. There's another perspective on the transjectivity of money. It's neither subjective nor objective. It's a little bit of both. And also on the topic of symbols, it's said that they simultaneously reveal and conceal, which I've always thought was very interesting. And I think with money, the economists will say, okay, through the pricing system, we reveal our demonstrated preferences to one another, basically through our buying and our selling. But at the same time, as I said earlier, it's compressing or washing
Yeah.
away all that extraneous data.
Yeah.
So it's concealing all of your stated preferences, all of your story, all of your narrative. Like it doesn't matter. It's like, did you buy it or did you sell it? The end. Like how did you feel about it? Why did you buy it? Like all of that is just washed away because other people don't need to know that. They just need to know where demand and supply are dynamically interlinking at that moment. And so it is deeply symbolic in that sense and deeply transjective.
I love when people will like, oh, I am an Arab and I hate the Jew. And then you don't know that about each other and you do economic exchange. And
Yeah,
it's
they
kind of
both like
cool
gold.
that like all of these kind of identity characteristics become irrelevant when you just want bread and they just want to sell bread. And it's
Yeah.
it's kind of tragic when identity politics get into those things because it gets so stupid and absurd. It's like, I don't make gay cakes. It's like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Literally having a city where people don't fight about, homosexuality in the bakery is much more desirable and was happening until identity politics. So it's so cool that it does abstract away a lot of irrelevant aspects of identity in the economic exchange. And actually, there's a lot of I mean, there was a funny fact that like America had never bombed a country with a McDonald's in it. It's like if you had enough American culture to put a McDonald's there, you actually started liking us and not being an enemy and stuff. And it's cool that doing economic things can bring humans together,
Mhm.
um, which again is like symbolic. It's doing that religio aspect, that the binding of
So
things, and it's the emergent third that's happening from this independent desires and stuff like that.
the Bastiat said, if goods don't cross borders, soldiers will.
That's probably true. Yeah, no, it's I mean, look at Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. Like that's I think the best hope for ending the war is people getting upset about the economic collapse because everyone's so either zoned out or caged into their ideology that there's no intellectual crosstalk happening. It's a lot of posturing, which then if you're a politician you love because then they're not paying attention to you. They're just fighting within themselves or there's hopelessness. But people go, look, man, I can't even afford college for my kids. I can't get to work. I now want to vote people out, even though I was pretty apathetic 5 months ago or whatever. Yeah, no, economic. That's why I found it beautiful. I think if there was like more college positions for Austrian economist, I would have never probably gotten into org psych. It's just like impossible to find a professor job. So my pragmatism, overtook my idealism or whatever.
I just want to reflect on something here because something is sort of out of this conversation. So I did propose money in Awakening from the Meaning Crisis as a psychotechnology, as Rob said, and I helped to bring about second order thinking because it we internalized abstract, which is both of you have given a very good account of the abstract symbolic system. And it's also calculative. It's rigorously formal. You can calculate with it. And that became entrenched in our metacognition, and that empowers us greatly. But I hear it sounds like there's another one you're proposing here, which I hadn't thought of. And so question is coming to mind. You were both nodding when I said the previous three, so I don't think you're disputing those. But there seems to be this fourth one, which, in addition to be abstract, symbolic, calculative, it's also, in some sense, as you said, I'll use the term disclosing to try and get that revealing, concealing. That's Heidegger's way of doing it. It's also disclosing of something like transjective collective intelligence in a way that, how do I want to put this? I want to put this as neutrally as possible, so forgive me if I push a button that I don't mean to. But you're making people. So I've read Patrick McNamara's new book. It's coming out. He proposes, and he said, "John, I wish I'd read your work earlier," and all that sort of stuff, and we're just resonating. He proposes, because all the work that's emerging from Hole and others, collective intelligence has a collective agency that is non-reducible to the summation of the agency and the intelligence of, and now we have sort of rigorous argument for that. And his proposal was that the gods and the spirits were ways in which people interfaced, made present the collective agency to themselves so they could interface with it. And the face of the deity is so important there. But what I hear you saying, and play with me on this a little bit, because this is on the edge of my thinking, is that, yeah, but what money did was give people a new way of grokking, right, through this augmentation, right, the transjective presence of collective intelligence that wasn't bound up with any particular religious or cultural system. Is that, I heard you saying that, right? That's fascinating, don't you think? Because the gods have always been ethno-cultural beings, and money, is there a connection between this and the emergence? Because it's around the same time, you start to get the idea of a universal deity that is not bound to a particular cultural, ethnic origin, right? And is money the thing that starts to get us to think about collective intelligences, collective agency, independent of our cultural, ethnic allegiances? Because money is it isn't bound. In fact, we don't want it to be bound to us, because it stops doing what it's supposed to do. I mean, that's a proposal that just came to my mind. It's a fourth way in which it might have helped the Axial Revolution. It might have made people start to think about collective intelligences, collective agencies, bigger patterns that transcend their cultural, ethnic, religious orientations. And you both know me, I'm not here to smash religion. I never want to do that. But I'm trying to say, is this a fourth way in which it might have contributed to the Axial Revolution? What do you think? I mean, it's just an idea. I don't have any argument for it. I'm just proposing it but you were both arguing, hey, look, it's transnational, it's transcultural, it's like in the way it operates. And I was going, oh, that's really important. And making that so practically obvious to people that it's insinuating into their day-to-day economic exchanges, right? Think about that. Think about that, how that also could have contributed to the emergence of the Axial Revolution. What do you think?
Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few keystrokes. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your energy bill for 1 week per mining rig when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. And on top of this offer, you can also use code BREEDLOVE to get $100 off your first mining rig with Blockware Solutions. I think it's a beautiful proposal, first of all, and I love seeing your excitement when you tap into something, and it's infectious. So thank you. But I'm just going to throw some things back at you. I don't know if they're useful or not. I can't, the one that comes up for me quickly is like one of the best analogies, I think, for money in terms of its technological, let's say, usefulness is the Hindu Arabic numeral system.
Yes, very much.
If you study that, well, we had all these competing numeral systems, different forms of mathematics, and you had Babylonian cuneiform, you had Roman numerals, whatever. But then eventually along comes, zero-based numerals with zero at the heart of the whole system. And that particular psychotechnology or social technology, I don't know which one, maybe it's a little bit of both,
Yeah.
language,
Yeah.
is superior, right? In absolute terms, right? If you use the Hindu Arabic numeral system, you can perform calculation better, faster, cheaper, less prone to error.
Rob, that's a great argument for the transjectivity of it. It's not purely subjective because some of these systems fit us better to our problems than others do.
100%. And it's an absolute economic advantage to use it versus to not use it, to the point
Right.
where all the merchants that use it succeed at the expense of those who don't, and therefore Hindu Arabic numerals.
And then the merchants who also bring in negative integers start to they get like a superpower over their competitors.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and it
Yeah.
leads to double entry bookkeeping and all of these
Yeah.
other things. And the great book on this, a great book, there's several, but Charles Seif's book, Zero, The Biography of a Dangerous Idea, is really good on this.
Yes, I've heard of the book. Yes.
It's just a very profound innovation. Like we can't even imagine it. Zero also led to the invention of calculus. Calculus underpins like every modern science. So
Yeah.
all of industrialization, all of the scientific revolution, all of the Enlightenment, like kind of has some is at least benefited by zero, if not made possible by it. So there's that going on, and money's, I think, more comparable to the Hindu Arabic numeral system than it would be like English, for instance, because
Yes.
obviously we have many
Yes.
different spoken
Yes.
languages, but mathematics is a universal language, right? It's
Right. Yes.
obviously money is very mathematical, and so and gold, would be a good example of like the emergence of a universal money. There was no committee or country that decided, hey, let's make gold money. Like, no, this is a free market phenomenon.
Mhm.
Individual people deciding with their own skin in the game what tool is best for the job caused gold to ascend as money. So, you get one language basically. You get one Hindu Arabic numeral system. You get one free market money in the world, which is gold. We now think, Bitcoin, I would argue is now competing for that role. And in terms of like, how does that contribute to the Axial Age and getting people to think that way? It's like, well, the thing that Nietzsche said comes to mind, and I don't even know if I can paraphrase this properly, but he was saying something like, um, you know, but this is going to be a very rough paraphrase, and it might not even be fully correct, so forgive me. It was something like Christianity entrained our mind to get to think, to point all of our beliefs and our actions toward one thing. And so
Yeah.
that enabled us to like entrain ourselves to move as like one collective whole.
Mhm.
And so I mean, well, Hindu Arabic numeral system does that to some extent. Perhaps money also does that to some extent. There is the etymology of the word God, goes into the word gut, G-H-U-T, in one derivation, and that word is related to exchange.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's Proto-Indo-European. And then, and then just one kind of last far-flung idea, which I shared with you previously, John. All of these, I think the term you and I settled on was the primordial presuppositions, I think may have
Yes.
been what it
Yeah.
was.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
the Tao of Taoism, the one
Yeah.
of Neoplatonism,
Yeah.
the pure experience of William James, the dynamic quality of Robert Pirsig. There's
Yeah.
many others. Is it the Brahman of Hinduism? Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's the
Atman
Brahman.
is Brahman. Yes. Of
And so,
Vedanta. Yeah. There's
yes,
many
and so these
Hinduisms, but of Vedanta. Yes.
And so one common thing between all of those kind of unspeakable, the Tao, which we call the Tao, is not the eternal Tao. There's always the
Yeah.
thing that's beyond articulation. In almost all those traditions, they're saying, it's neither subjective, it's neither objective. It's
Yes.
somewhere in between.
Right.
It's somewhere between.
Yeah.
It's somewhere between. And so, well, then I get into like Mises's axiom of action, and then Hoppe's description of the axiom of action that it's where mind and matter come into contact, right? It's where
Mm.
subject and object come into contact. So that action is this pre-intellectual or pre-categorical split between subject, object, and anything else for that
Yeah.
matter. So
Yeah.
then it becomes the thing that you can't ever ultimately articulate. And we see this in performative contradiction, right? When I
Yeah.
tell you this sentence is not in English,
Yeah.
what is it that's speaking louder than my words that tells you I'm lying to you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What is it? What is it that's speaking? It's the action. Okay,
Yes.
but if I try to describe that action to you, then it's not the action. It's just my
Yeah. Yeah.
statement of it.
Yeah.
It's not my demonstration of it.
Yeah.
So that's where like we kind of go in the book. It's like we think, all of Austrian economics is based on Mises's axiom of action, and it is this primordial presupposition that's neither subjective nor objective. And maybe that is somehow connected to all of these other presuppositions and other
Well,
wisdom traditions.
it does coordinate a lot of harmony. Like in Pythagoreanism, harmony is like a meta virtue, or um, I love the royal couple of like the masculine and the feminine coming together. The Tao precedes the gods, and like new symbols can revolutionize. So if you have like a system, you can say, "Oh, I just need to perfect that system. Every time I encounter an error or I want to go beyond, I need to just focus more on what I'm doing." But sometimes something almost completely outside of that allows you to reject the whole system. And the ability to switch between systems is metacognition in a way that, like, if you're just able to do conscious processing but never able to take second order views of yourself, then you kind of get stuck the way a cat can't imagine like a non-cat world. And when John talks about in his series, like, we not only model ourselves, but we model how others see us. And if we can internalize those positions on our position, we then have this whole other way of processing our own reality that goes beyond what our individual cognition can kind of afford.
Yes.
So picking up on that, money, and now I'm thinking about the role it played in the philosophical Silk Road, right? Money gives us a transcultural, transnational, trans-ethnic access to other people's perspectives,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Well,
What
and
is
their
the language?
goods and their ideas. And we it also is
Exactly,
a
exactly.
motivating force that makes you want to know someone better. Because if you're a
Yeah,
trader and you go, "Oh gosh, I need to not only have a thing to trade, but I need to be charming." And now all of a sudden I want to like befriend you. And then when I befriend you, I fall in love with you. And that has a kind of forward, motion to it. Yeah, it pulls you out as it binds together, I think.
I don't know
that's
if I ever
interesting.
asked you this, John, but just, what is the language that cohered the Silk Road?
Well, I mean, um, I think there's different. I mean, one of the things I'm entertaining is your proposal for something like gold, is what allows uh, for the exchange. I've also been arguing that well, I've been teaching a course on it. This ability for these grand integrating philosophical frameworks like Neoplatonism and Vedanta and Zen to like deeply dialogue with each other, what I call dialogos. And so I think you've got a bunch of things weaving the Silk Road together. But what I hadn't thought of was that this proposal that I think I've just taken it from what you two were saying, that, money drives a way of being international and interethnic and trans-religious. It went like that I hadn't given proper responsibility to it in my previous theorizing, because it like, again, like you did it, like you like money makes you have to recognize, if you want to be wise about your money. People can just be foolish, but that people can be foolish. The Hindu Arabic numeral system, that doesn't mean anything. But if you want to be wise about your money, I take it that, well, maybe I'm asking an empirical question, Robert, but you would know. I would propose that people who have the metacognitive ability of picking up on perspectives other than their own, or their own culture, or their own locale, are the people who do the best with money. If I can, and I'm trying to say that as neutrally as possible. Notice I'm not picking a particular economic system. I'm just making a cognitive proposal that the person who can do this, right, who picks up that transnational, transcultural, trans-religious ability to pick up trans-individual, like, and not only just my collective, but cross collectives can pick up those multiple like a hyper pattern of, perspectives. That's the person that's going to do better with money and trading than the evolutionary theory that we have is that trading between groups was emerged out of shamanism, because the shaman was somebody who practiced perspectives other than his own or just of the group, and therefore could mediate between various groups. This is what's coming to my mind.
I would even say that the technology that does that and the groups that do that. So individuals for sure, but also like we're saying, like Bitcoin might be better at being a
Exactly. Good,
virtual
Rob.
ledger,
Yeah,
and a
yeah,
team that manages their choice of Bitcoin and other baskets of whatever is going to outperform individuals and teams that
yeah,
don't
yeah.
do
Totally.
it the realist or whatever.
Correct.
Totally. So we shouldn't talk about it just as individual psychology. We should also talk about it. We should talk about it that way, but we should also talk about it in terms of organizational psychology. I totally agree with that. That's an excellent amendment.
Yeah. I guess that's an assumption that I typically make because I think through the lens of like methodological individualism that, well,
Yeah.
obviously all groups are formed by individuals. So if you're talking about the individual, you're indirectly talking about groups. Bitcoin's going to benefit an individual that's trying to beef up his savings account, just like it's going to beef up a corporation's treasury account, right?
Mhm.
So, but just on something you said there, like money is game theoretic. So the entrepreneur that's going to succeed, he's anticipating consumer preference. He's not even meeting it. Because if you're going to build something and take it to market, it takes time, right? You don't just
Yes.
immediately poof have a solution. So you have to you have to bring the right supply to where demand will be in the future. How do
Yeah.
you do that? That's a
Yeah.
game theoretic process. Let me take on their perspective. Let me think who they are, what they need, what they would like, what problems do they face? How could I help them solve them? And then you have to skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is, to use a Canadian hockey metaphor. And so
Yeah.
like it is
Yeah.
that game theoretic
Yes.
thing. Those are the most successful entrepreneurs, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's definitely that element to it. The
So,
only
so,
other, go
so
ahead.
just, no, just before, don't lose your next point.
Yep.
I just want to sort of like, okay, it seems that it's at least initially prima facie plausible that the advent of money, right, and its uptake, because it spreads really quickly,
Mhm.
right, or really, really quickly. It's like the Hindu Arabic numerals, how
Mhm.
rapidly it spreads. it gives people another way, in addition to, like you said, the Indo-European, no,
Mhm.
but it starts to get people to think universally. It starts to
Yeah.
get them to think in this, not their meta-perspectival cognition is taking in perspectives other than their
Yes.
own individually, culturally, ethnically, religiously, because the Christian has to sell
Yes.
to the Muslim, right? And so
Yeah.
something is going on there. I had I'm sorry, for me, it's an important realization to get to that. Because I had done the symbolic, abstract, symbolic, and calculative,
Hmm.
but this third thing about it, how it gives a transcultural, transnational, meta-perspectival cognition. I think that is really important for the Axial Revolution because this is where you get the emergence of universalizing proposals, like you
Right.
said, like the God of Israel, right? And
Yeah.
the one God or Brahman or Tao.
Yeah.
That's one of the characteristics of the Axial Age proposals.
Yes. Yes. And
So I just
if
wanted
I
to nail that down before you went into your next point, Robert.
no,
Thank you
no,
for the
no, it's
space.
excellent. It's excellent. I thank you for doing it. I just to go because I tend to have kind of a physics view oftentimes, not all, but I try to connect it back to physics. And so
Mhm.
when I hear you saying that, I hear you saying something like, the use of money entrained our cognition to develop more perspectival knowing, or maybe
Yes,
develop,
Yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah, for
maybe
sure.
bootstrap it, something like
Well,
that.
just like
yeah,
reading and even
Yeah,
like
yeah,
understanding images.
yeah.
well, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Multiple people that speak. I did a lab study with the guy that had been doing it for like his whole career, near the end of his career, where we would put these devices on people's heads that would measure kind of how much where their blood was bouncing around. And multilingual people had much richer experiences when they would do word games than unilingual people, and like
yeah,
six
yeah,
language people even more. So if that's like a proxy for like a cultural explosion, then the capacity to go, oh, now I have to both imagine the Egyptians
Yeah.
and interact with them. That's going to force me to kind of think at different ways than before. There's a
yes.
trade-off too, because you can lose the small as you scale up. There are
Of
multi-level
course.
like
There's always
trade-offs.
trade-offs.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
inevitable. Yeah, yeah.
But
But I'm just
but
trying
no,
to
it
get
forces
a
you.
function. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really, really, really cool. That's really interesting. Um, yeah. So,
If
what you
I
had another
may,
point, Robert? I interrupted you. What was your other
no, no,
point?
no. Yeah, just something to add on. But one other thing on that point, also like, warfare, right? It's the game theory thing. It's where you have to learn to think, steps ahead of your opponent, right? It's the
Yes.
anticipation
Yeah.
that makes you superior. So like, I'm not going to say it's just money that did it all, but like you were saying with literacy, obviously does it to some extent.
Yeah.
Numeracy,
Yeah.
maybe even adversarial thinking.
It does, but the thing about money that's different from warfare is, right, I'm trying to take on your value structure because
Yes.
I want to be, and in warfare, I'm not. I'm
Yeah,
trying to undermine and destroy your
that's right.
value system. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of, yes, it shares some of the game theoretic, but it's different. And so think about how game theoretic stuff changes when it goes from adversarial to like
Cooperative.
you do the thing like do you want $5? Yes, right.
Hmm.
Or, now I give you five and I give him 10 or I give you both zero. What do you want? Well, zero. Well, I'm
Hmm.
only going to get
Hmm.
like people do that weird stuff all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 It's irrational, but the sense of fairness isn't there, right? So
Yeah,
people,
yeah. So what I'm saying is that while I agree that there's something like warfare, there's something very antithetical. I'm not
yeah.
saying that money prevents war. That's a ridiculous proposal. But I'm saying, no, no, to use Rob's example, like why do the Egyptians value this stuff? Why do they
Mhm.
want so many dates or something? Like what's going on? Well, it's part of their religion. Well, why? Like what's going on? Oh, and, like I have to get into the religion that like I have to get into the religious and cultural mindset of the Egyptians if I want to do, if like you said it, if I want it, well, what might they need that they don't yet have, and
Yeah.
all that sort of thing.
Right.
That's why
Uh,
it's so normative, because like Robert was saying, if you anticipate poorly, you lose, right?
Yeah,
And if you anticipate really well, you thrive. And I used to do virtual trading between currencies, between two virtual currencies and some activity, which I often use the virtual currencies to pay other people to do the activity. So I understood what was happening, but I wasn't enacting a lot of the economic things. And I was just printing money. It was amazing. And I wasn't doing it maliciously. Everyone was happy. The people I was buying from were excited. They had a new customer that was buying more than any other customer. The people that wanted to play the game got all these free items for doing what they already did. And it was just like creating value everywhere. And so it's this idea that Austrians don't have this very cynical view of a capitalist. It's I always think of it as amoral and irrational because you can take a good moral system and that trader will do good. You can take an evil moral system and that trader will be parasitic or whatever. But the actual economic laws kind of don't they couple with morality and can really be very virtuous in ways that are hard to see if you're purely like, oh, it's supply side. You're always it's zero sum and you're taking to get, or oh, it's this evil money printing government. It's like, well, no, we just have very few Marcus Aureliuses and many, many more Neros, and that's why we have a stigma on politicians in general. But the economic laws transcend or are different from moral laws in some sense. But when you do things normatively good, people like that, and you find ways to creatively combine resources that were idle or used less effectively. It's amazing to do. That's why I'm so interested in Robert's love of Bitcoin because I don't quite understand it. I've never done it except for in these other virtual ways, but he loves it, and so do a lot of other people. So it makes me kind of curious into why it's superior to, more gold or a government's currency or whatever.
Yeah,
Just to
if I
be.
try to answer that as briefly as possible, I mean, we talk about it for hours and hours and hours and hours on the podcast, but it comes down to the principle of private property, which is really, how cost effectively can someone hold an asset and defend it from anyone else that's trying to steal it from them or seize it from them. And so that relationship, let's say the integrity of the relationship between the owner and the asset, the harder it is to violate that relationship, the less of an incentive there is for stealing, harming, killing. And so the love for Bitcoin is, oh, this is the most cost-effective form of private property there's ever been, right? You can store an alphanumeric string in your brain and you can have $1 billion in your brain, right? And it's if yeah, you can also store it between keys so you're not vulnerable to coercion and torture and things like that. But it creates this, if you imagine a world that was using that as its money, then the incentives for killing, stealing, and hurting other people are actually they're in a inverse relationship to how expensive it is to defend that property. So compared to gold, for instance, gold's physical. So if I can break into your house and put a gun to your head, I can take your gold, right? That's a pretty decent incentive for me to break into your house and put a gun to your head. But if it's in a Bitcoin multi-sig and I can't do that, then that crime no longer pays. Therefore, in the long run, we would expect that crime to become less prevalent. And now that's kind of like at the individual burglar level, but it also holds at the collective warfare level, right? If Nazi Germany invades Poland, the first thing they did, which this is historically accurate, the first thing they do is go to their central bank and take all their gold. Well, if we rerun that scenario and Poland has all of their central bank reserves in a Bitcoin multi-sig, well, Germany just spent a lot of money invading them, and they go to the central bank and there's no carrot at the end of that stick. Well, then maybe the German war machine goes bankrupt sooner. So the bigger, more idealistic, interesting promise of Bitcoin is that it disincentivizes, or at least lowers the incentives to coercion and violence. And so that, if, as I take human beings to be very incentive responsive creatures, I think it can actually reshape our morality over time. But of course, this is a multi-decade or even multi-century game. So, um, but fun to think about and talk about.
It would
Yeah,
be
no, the
interesting.
problem of violence is a big deal because the parasitic processing in economics is like the biggest deal in some sense. If you lose the legal system's justice and you have to then spend all of your resources protecting yourself, usually what happens in primitive societies is once they get enough wealth to have others want to steal it, politics emerges because you
Exactly.
need to ration away 2% of the adults to guard the borders or whatever. Whereas you don't have that cost when there's no incentive for people to invade or to steal and stuff. So there's at a lower level, you don't need a political structure. But then when you get to a certain kind of material level, you then all of a sudden need to take some of your productive adults and turn them into like lawmakers and military and stuff like. And then when you go against the collective and go, oh, we don't need firefighters, then the whole village burns down. You just start at zero. So like other social services to keep the whole running often kind of do those things as well. But you see that very, very consistently in very simple cultures. If they have nothing to steal, no one plots to go invade and take their
That's right.
loincloths or whatever. But as soon as it's easier to send your like 80 buffest guys on a boat across the sea, some groups will go like, I like being a Viking or whatever. And now like the sweet people need to start investing in defenses. And then so yeah, I think that actually lines up a lot with what you're saying, that if you can make it a lower cost to disincentivize violence towards the wealth as a cheaper way of getting economic power, then it's a superior form to something that will attract invaders or whatever.
It's a cheaper wall, if you want to use a very basic metaphor. And when the wall is cheaper, you need less people, less labor going towards building and maintaining the wall. More people can be productive. So you're tilting human action away from non-productive, coercive activity or protective, if you want to use the nice framing of it, towards productive, cooperative activity.
So you've also made the argument, which I'm not asking you to repeat here, because Robert, you and I've talked about it at length, um, that it's if pricing is the fifth P, it's also a more accurate pricing. It's a more accurate way of knowing the transjective collective intelligence
Yeah.
than some of our standard models. And if currency per se had the cognitive effect I've been proposing, then it's possible, in addition to these moral and legal changes, there would be significant cultural cognitive changes if we all moved to Bitcoin, because we would start thinking in its terms, the way
Mhm.
we think in monetary terms now.
Mhm.
I might not be using the terms accurately, but I think you know the intent of what I'm trying to say. That's interesting because, as you know, both of you, I just had a conversation, a whole bunch of conversations. Everybody is starting to talk now. I'm going to be Paul Antleitner. He's got a book out. Uh, uh, Antleitner, he's a friend of mine, called "Based on a True Story," um, and he's talking. The core thesis of this book, a lot of people are talking about this, and a lot of people are enacting it, and that's why I'm doing the Philosophical Silk Road. The proposal that there's an advent of the sacred that is taking place now at the level of the Weltgeist to respond to the zeitgeist of the meaning crisis. And so things are just, and he said he can detect a vibe shift. That's what the book is about. We're going to go, but I'm wondering, like, I mean, there's a possibility. I mean, Justin Sledge made a good point. He said nobody can be responsible for the Renaissance, but everybody has to take responsibility for it. Which is, he says, if you look in the Renaissance, like people like Ficino are going, I don't know if I can make anything happen, but I have this responsibility now about bringing about the advent of the sacred, right? Which is what the Renaissance was, and the race, like, right, and of course the axial. There's a cultural renaissance in Athens, right? The axial revolution, um, and I'm just wondering. So this is not a proposal; it's much more loosely held. I'm wondering though if, right, this advent of the sacred could be bound up with people considering, right, this new way of living with and through money that might bring with it cultural cognitive potential that we could exapt that we have not yet tapped into. That's just a wonder. I'm not making that a theoretical proposal. I'm just
I know
throwing out
Alexander Bard and people like him talk about as these digital communities or digital currencies, these distributed networks that are not bound to cities and nationality,
that's right.
they redistribute power away
Yes.
from the idea
Yeah.
of a state. And then you
Yes. Yes.
stop thinking about like your loyalty to Germany or your loyalty to America because it's not loyal to you. And in fact, like a lot of the cynicism that exists on like YouTube or social media has an outlet because the algorithm accidentally rewards good stories, even if there's some person typing downvote that person. He's an enemy of Trump and we're owned by Elon Musk or whatever. Downvote, downvote. Someone just can independently put a good story about Epstein Island or whatever, and it starts getting likes, and then it rises to the top despite, antagonistic goals to the people owning the platforms, let's say. Because people don't care about national loyalty, they want freedom and happiness, and they associate outsiders with those things, but then those outsiders end up being corrupted. And so, yeah, if everyone is going like, oh, I'm glad to be free of the dollar. I'm glad it just collapsed under the weight of itself. I'm happy to use Bitcoin to pay for my grandparents' retirement and my children's education, and I can use the lectern and the Vervaeke Foundation to educate my college age students, and I don't have to choose between Florida State University and University of Toronto because they're both defunct, top-heavy, corrupt institutions. Um, that's it's an interesting argument because it's so theoretical, and there are like the big fat ugly organizations learn and adapt better than people think they do. Like everyone thought, oh, the internet would dislodge all of the old way, but the old way had so much capital in terms of human capital, financial capital, that it goes, I'll buy those up. And then the corruption rises back up or what. So, but there's a strong incentive that reasonable people are sick of the politics, and if there is a viable alternative, they would gravitate to it, I think.
It's an interesting thought experiment, at least the idea that, because I've been concentrating what I call semiotic symbiosis. Why do certain ideas suddenly get magnetized together and become a new form of life for people? Semiotic symbiosis. You see this in the history of religions, like the God of the Bible. There's L, and then he integrates with YWH, whatever. However, I'm not going to pronounce it because there's Jewish people here, and then that integrates with Ahura Mazda, and that integrates with the Platonic good, with Philo, and then it integrates again with the Neoplatonic one, and then it integrates with this weird proposal from this weird guy, Jesus of Nazareth, and God just keeps like, right? And that my favorite artistic work around that is Equus by Peter Schaefer, where I identify very strongly with Dysart, who's the psychiatrist who has to cure Alan. But in Alan, what's happening is Equus is being born, the god that lives in all horses, and all these things are being magnetized together. And Dysart, he has to. This is the great tension of the play. He has to cure Alan of this religion in order to save him, because Alan has done something really horrific. Um, but Dysart doesn't want to, because he longs to be in relationship with the sacred. So this semiotic symbiosis is happening. So you get, not that long ago, Jonathan Pajot, John Vervaeke, and Michael Levin all talking, and they're doing like the philosophical Silk Road. We're talking about Neoplatonism and biology and Christianity and symbolism and 4E cog sci. We wouldn't have talked that way 10 years. And so I'm thinking about that,
Well, that's
but now I'm
why.
thinking about, well, wait, I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
finished
yeah,
the thought.
yeah, yeah.
Now I'm thinking that yeah, but because money played a role, if that proposal still is plausible, in helping the original axial revolution, it probably plays a vital role in the advent of the sacred that I hadn't thought about. And Robert, your work is actually potentially very central to that role that it might play.
Yeah, I think what came up for me there is the semiotic symbiosis term, so
Yeah.
symbols engaging in reciprocally beneficial action,
Yeah,
right? Or something
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah. They
symbol.
they 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 draw. Well, that's why I'm using symbiosis. Just like
Yes.
the way the bacteria went
Yeah.
into the primitive
Right.
thing, and they get the
Yeah.
eukaryotic cell and things like that.
Which again is, I mean, in economics, they call that the division of labor, basically, right? It's people
Yeah.
acting symbiotically. I make the hats and I'm better at that. You make the boots, you're better at that. We trade, we're both better off. We're in a positive sum game. And so,
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. There's a way in which division of labor and cross-cultural trade on the philosophical Silk Road actually
mhm.
would therefore enhance, especially if there's money, would
Mhm.
enhance symbiotic symbiosis. Now, Robert Gray, I'll make space for you. I know I closed off with
If
because I
I
got
could
to.
add one
Yeah,
thing, and then just because of that term, Matt Ridley has described ideas having sex. I don't know if you've
yeah,
read
yeah,
The
yeah, yeah,
Universal
yeah.
Optimist. Like it sounded a lot like that.
It's like that, but
Um,
I like symbiosis better than sex, right?
yeah.
Because you get it with sex, you're maintaining a species. When
Hmm.
symbiosis, you're not only giving birth to a new species, you're giving birth to a possibility of a whole new
Yeah.
set of species. The
Yeah.
eukaryotic cell makes possible all the multicellular species, right?
Yes.
Like, and that's what whole ecologies come into existence when you get semiotic symbiosis. That's why I prefer it over ideas
Yes.
have
Yes.
sex. That's I think
Yes.
it's because I mean ideas do have sex. I get that,
Yeah.
but I want to talk about but there's times when there's the advent of the sacred and a whole new ecology of the sacred becomes available to us.
Hmm. Hmm.
Robert
They
Gray,
have they
yeah,
have in organizational theory this idea of compositional and compilational emergence. And so compositional emergence is mostly additive. And so if someone had a really great idea and they have enough savings to buy five laborers and like a factory space or whatever, then they can start like turning that into value. But if you take a group of knitters and a group of marketers, and then a group of scientists that can like go out and do research. They can create something greater than each of the three could create
oh yeah, yeah,
independently.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
so and it has a name, so you can say like, oh, this kind of emergence is compositional. It's mostly additive, and so that's great because if you love bowling, having a bowling alley that attracts other bowlers lets you do more than alone. But compilational emergence is novel and it's a
yeah, yeah.
complexification. And so
Oh, that's good. I didn't know about
yeah,
that
yeah. Well, that's
distinction.
why I invited you to this because I saw you talking about this stuff and bringing in some of the organizational theory and the multi-level modeling. Like they've been loving this stuff since at least the 90s.
Well, and
And
it maps onto Eric Hole and Alicia Uraro and all the stuff in
100%. Well,
485.
yeah, Alicia
Yeah,
Herraro, I think
yeah.
can is super interesting to bring up and down levels.
Rob,
Yeah.
where can I get like the original presentation of this
Yeah,
distinction
yeah.
so that I can properly give credit? You know what? That's important to
Yeah,
me.
no, I'll send you a bunch of these papers and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And
Okay, that's very helpful.
yeah, because otherwise you get really sloppy thinking and you get philosophers like that don't appreciate emergence to go, oh, well, we've taken the it's all compositional, therefore we can write it off. Or
Well,
it's
that's the
all
proposal that there's only weak emergence,
well,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But if
Yeah,
you're only dealing with kind of like philosophers, they don't appreciate what organizational science talks about.
I
And
agree. I agree.
and it's Melissa Schilling. I don't know, Robert, if you've heard of her before. She's one of the best researchers on insight in the
Yeah,
business
yeah,
world. John cites her in his series.
yeah.
She's done
She's
work in the last,
amazing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But she's done this work lately on if you have an expert system and it has like a tangential, unrelated hobby that also tends to predict and be followed by emergence, which is
Yeah,
ironic.
that
You're
looks like
going
symbiosis ready to happen.
right. Well, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
that's
this symbi
perfect, Rob.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right.
Can you, yeah, can you send me that? I like, yeah, I respect her work. Her idea that
Oh,
part of
she's
what's
so
going on,
good.
what's going on in Insight is a regular network collapses into a small world network. I think that was sorry for there's sort of a meta pun here. That was a brilliant insight about Insight. That was really really good. But this thing you just said, I want to see it. I want to see it, Rob. I want to see it.
Yeah,
So if you
because she the one of the nice things about organizational science, like economics, is they look at culture as kind of a neutral outsider, and being able to do that without just being nonsensical and solipsistic or whatever is hard to do. But like yeah, she talks about like structural factors that could create those kind of things. Um, and then it's not like it makes sense that sometimes you want to do more kind of exploiting, sometimes you need to explore. It's not like
course,
which
always.
one, or it's not flip a
Yeah,
coin. It's like, oh no, actually, if we build in some exploration and encourage play, which there's a whole science of, then that play will crosstalk into the other group. And then you can have like, oh wow, there's these two religious groups, these Buddhists and these Platonists. They both love contemplation and living well, and
exactly.
then they can create newness. Yeah, and it's not like
It,
trivial because like in category theory, there's more difference within a group than between a group. So if they're
yeah.
mining the cosmos independently and then they synergize, it's not just the same that's happening. It's like, oh wow, Neoplatonism evolved or whatever.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do with the Philosophical Silk Road and what I'm doing with the current course I'm teaching from east to west on the possibility of Zen Neoplatonism, which is exact. And so many people are converging on this. We're kind of doing it here. Like
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
like, we're kind of like, we're coming from, I mean, we're coming from disciplines that if you would go back into the 1980s, we're not talking to each other,
Mhm.
right?
Well, here,
They're
let me
not.
show you my little slideshow. This is fun.
Okay.
So this was like I was trying to kind of muse on why would philosophy talk to science, which I love that spot where you start to get like science plus virtue. There's a lot of
Yeah.
like, oh, we've identified a problem and we've studied it and stuff like that. And then economics deals with human nature in a way philosophers and scientists often don't, but the Austrians are super philosophical. They're like you were saying earlier, John, like they're actually interested in zooming out and understanding causation, not just like powerful correlations that make them prestigious or
Yeah.
whatever. So um this
Well,
was
Mises goes so far to say that causality is subordinate to action, actually. So yeah, he's very deep.
well,
Yes.
yeah, and then you have a coupling between theory and action, which often
Mhm.
you have these like
Yeah.
theory people and these intuition action people, and they
Mhm.
just are like, "Well, I'm vibing. I don't need the science." And the scientists are like, "I'm sciencing. I don't need these vibers." But when you start to get harmony, you get this emergent stuff, and then you can actually like explain your intuitions. I think that's one of the beauties of kind of the Socratic Platonic view is they don't just want like shamanic power. They want to have like intelligible insights and stuff like that. It's I love John gets so excited about intelligibility sometimes. It like it makes me feel like I like it's that like is there a word, John, for like feeling like a kid as an adult?
Well, there's the literal Greek word enthusiast, to be filled with a
Yes.
god, and
Yeah, I
theos.
feel this
Yeah,
enthusiasm and I get to
yeah,
witness it. And it's I love that because that's theological. Yeah, exactly. So
yes.
these are some of the things that organizational psychology can bring to bear on the economic, philosophical, cognitive science kind of discussion. So they talk a lot I think in really concrete ways about some of the levels, like the Neoplatonists go from like the one to
Mhm.
the individual. The Austrians have like really good, like the firm, the government, the individual. But then like org psych talks about dyads quite a bit, teams. There's some really exciting research they were doing at Michigan State where I was at on teams of teams. So they would train individual teams for like a year and then put them in massive situations where they had to coordinate. So even like what are those doing? They also do multicultural studies. It's like a more peripheral to that world, but there are people that are just interested in like the cultural interface and for sure like organizations. They mostly study success, which is like a strength and a weakness. Although, if you look at some of the more popular journals, you'll see them caring about meaning the way John talks about it a lot more, and they're theorizing about it and they're curious. A friend of mine and I submitted a proposal on meaning 10 years ago, and they were like, I don't know how to make sense of it, and they rejected it, but they gave us really positive remarks. Now you just see almost the same ideas showing up more. They're pretty good at well-being too. Like stress, they talk about parenting and having, parenting be part of the organizational culture, that kind of stuff. But they talk about all three. Those are kind of the three big buckets of variables. So they care about religion, they care about economic things. They talk about both action and theory. So cognitive science is about theory, business people are about action. They definitely, there's gaps, but there's data that they get from the military, from actual firms, from definitely student populations as well, but like way broader in their theory testing and building. It's kind of fun doing research with the military because they're almost like minimal theory. Sometimes they'll ignore theory to publish things that have pragmatic power. So within even their domains, you can kind of see that they're broader, but they care quite a bit about action, which is it's a lot of proxies for action in most of economics outside of the Austrians. They're really good at measurement. They're actually, if you measure the knowledge that people leave graduate school with, or even that the average practitioner has, it's like the highest in measurement. So, like Robert, you talk about zeros. It was really like organizational theorists and psychologists that went into kind of nominal, ordinal, interval, um,
Mm.
and so on kind of theory and get to, okay, well, this is categorical, this is numeric or able to translate numeric, but we also have a zero. And so there's lots of really, really nice measurement theory, systems theory, stuff like that, modeling, a lot of computer modeling. Um, they get into the individual, I think, in a really good way too, like personality theory and individual differences. You can see like not only what are someone's like personality traits, but how much do they vary within domains. Like someone could be really high in conscientiousness, but have a wide range across time. Same, a different person can be like high in conscientiousness, but always conscientious. So if you're running a company or interacting with someone, you can make sense of the person a lot better with a lot of this stuff. And then they care a lot about training and that adaptivity, which is like very spiritual in a sense, like in a very combinatorial explosive world, being able to like understand adaptation is really good. And they have a lot of theory in that. And also training and learning. Like there's a lot of papers that'll say like the best organization or the best team is a learning team. So instead of saying it's like good at goods or good at services, like does it learn because of the amount of like, pressure to change in the globalist world or whatever. So these are, I think, some of the things that they do well that could make interesting things for Austrians and bring cognitive science up a level and stuff. Like they
Mm.
study group flow,
Yeah.
group well-being and stuff like that. And so um, these are, I think, some things that, and I have experience in most of these as like research and stuff. So there's a lot of other things they do, but these are things that I know. Okay, let's say. So this was like a chart I was making, and I was trying to find like which category might exist across these. So like Neoplatonism has the soul, cognitive science has the mind, the main organizational levels are like individual teams and organizations and org psych. Economics might have like firms and markets and government. So these are why it's maybe takes a effort and a new grammar to start to have these perspectives talk because their perspectives are so good at their ways, but don't bridge. Um, Spiritual exercises are like learning or like training and development or like the market self-correcting and rewarding good behavior and like sorting out errors and stuff like that. Economics has entrepreneurs, Neoplatonism has sages, the organizational world has leadership, and they study that kind of stuff. So that's multi-level. So these are all just categories that are, I think, similar. I love this fifth one. Math was divine, you have, like Pythagoras is going like, I'm so excited. I found, there's an irrational and irrational element to these circles. Um, or it was absent. You get a lot of philosophy that's like purely linguistic or purely symbolic that like kind of eschews math. You don't see a lot of math in Plotinus, let's say.
Or
Um,
Aristotle. There's no math in
right,
Aristotelian circles.
Aristotle, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
Aristotle is could benefit from an Austrian education, maybe. Um,
Just on the Austrian point, I mean, you know, it's very mathematics-like, whereas Keynesian economics sort of uses mathematics to create these models that don't really have any anchoring into reality. So it looks much more rigorous. But Austrian economics, on the other hand, doesn't use much mathematical modeling, but the axiom is irrefutable of action, then it's deducing logically from there, something like Euclidean geometry. So it's like the integrity of the science as a
Ah,
deductive. I
that's
think
interesting.
what's the term? Apodictic knowledge, where it's
Yes,
like
yes. Yeah.
basically it's that instead of the empirical approach that Keynesianism takes.
right, and it explains better, I think, because Keynesianism leads to a lot of confusion, whereas it works in some spots, but then all of a sudden it like falls apart. Same thing with like pure laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is amazing. I would probably rather live in a laissez-faire system than like a heavily top-down system, but it still falls apart sometimes, whereas the Austrians can kind of bridge because they do take situational transjectivity into account better. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, org psych, they do math really, really well. They talk about like discriminant validity, errors in measurement. So you can go like, oh, we have this theory, but now we can even justify ways that we tried to avoid errors in the theory. And there's like those are often like empty rooms at the conferences that like some people that love them are in. But if you're into like accuracy and truth, cognitive science has lots of math as well. They model really well. Um, uh, let's see.
Rob, what are you hoping to create with this table? Is this to try to
Well,
afford discourse between
yeah, I just wanted to point out some of the areas where there's like language issues and
right?
also potential benefits. Because, like,
I see.
if you
I
took
see.
the idea of sages and you're like, I love sages, then you could say, oh, what could I learn about entrepreneurs? Like, how does an entrepreneur do what they do well? And maybe so did Proclus. Or,
Mm.
there's so much leadership theory. What if we brought in, normativity of sages into that and said, oh, there's like, a lack of wisdom in the leadership literature. So I just think there are areas that kind of have
I see.
similarity
I see.
but difference. Yeah. Um, and again, like the 4E cognitive science, it could be really interesting to multi-level theorists. Like if someone saw this and they go, "Oh, I love John's work, but I do computer modeling and multi-level modeling," then starting to learn like, "Oh, what are these E's? What does exacting mean? Maybe we could think better about technology if we brought in like 4E cog sci ideas of imagination and exaptation, for example."
I see. I see.
And then these are just some more. So there's like really interesting ideas in motivation theory and effective science that maybe are missing from economics that could do explanatory power instead of saying like preferences. You could say like affective needs of fear and anger and what does grief do in the economic arena? Because now you can explain, funeral homes and a death celebration in South America better than maybe the purely economic account if you brought in some of the cognitive stuff. And also, I think you can start to understand, myths. There are economic myths all over the ancient world, and there's good and bad. Xenophon, one of the founders of Stoicism, had economic ideas. Aristotle had economic ideas. So you could bring in Austrian economics and talk about the downfall of Aristotle to a bunch of Aristotelianism, Robert, is the single most positive perspective in North American philosophy. Even if people don't talk about him a lot, like he's everywhere. So thinking like, oh, well, what could these newer things bring to these people that are into the old things? The imagination, I think, is probably the biggest thing because there's some social psych. I have this paper Where is it? It's the best. You'll like the name of this, John. Let me find it real quick. The affectiveness of symbols, materiality, magicality, and the limits of the anti-semiotic turn. So they talk about postmodernism and then how it kind of is starting to break down when you
Yes.
look at reality. So,
Yeah, I'd like to
the
read that
idea,
paper. Yeah, that sounds
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Um, I think the Neoplatonism and theology deals with love, friendship, romance, and agape way, way better than the Austrians or the organizational psychologists. I did a paper in a class, and so did my best friend, that kind of got into these things. And they kind of challenge the business world. If you encourage people to be courageous, they might quit. If you encourage people to want to love more, they might question the business ethics. Like Amazon, one of the biggest companies on earth, has the highest turnover rate, like in per capita or whatever. It's ridiculous. So like they're probably afraid of virtue ethics if they like, what they have. So I think again, like bringing the virtue stuff into the Austrian world might be really interesting. Go like, oh, wait, we weren't considering Eros and its role in the market or whatever. Um, Insight and flow, existing cognitive science, like the Neoplatonists and the Buddhists talk better about bliss, samadhi, joy, religious ecstasy. That's almost like the scariest thing to some scientists, the idea that there could be non-propositional knowing that's better than propositional knowing or whatever, or at least like reformulates that. But they also, interestingly, wonder about how beliefs change and how people's behaviors change. And if you add like, oh, well, they experience meditative joy, and then that started to make them question their trade-off relationships of their actions, and then move towards these more agapic activities or whatever. Um, Again, and sometimes the people market people like get too focused on outputs or resources when again, like people give up resources for meditative goals or for romantic goals, I think is much more reasonable. So. But then Org Psych talks about these things too. Collective affect is really interesting. Like there's emergent affective states that if you're only at the individual level, you can sometimes miss. So John and I, last time we were hanging out, we're talking about collective effervescence. Do you know what
Yeah.
that is, Robert?
I know effervescence, but I don't know the collective for it.
Yeah, yeah. So have you ever been like in some group experience where just everyone was happy and like almost
Oh
like,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
yeah, so
I
like
got one
that's
last
really
weekend.
happening. Oh, yeah, what was it? Yeah, yeah.
A concert.
Yeah.
Exactly, right. So you can explain that much more in terms of like teams and groups and organizations than if you just stay at the individual level, it almost
Yeah.
becomes irrational. If you're like, no, everything is the individual, it's like, no, we're just all participating in this greater being and it's
Yeah.
wonderful or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Parasitic
That's why
processes.
I really like, sorry to interrupt, but just
No, no, no,
one
please.
of the
Yeah.
things we do in the book, like we overlay, because I agree, the libertarian philosophy is very focused on the individual, rightfully so in some respects, in many respects, because the individual acts and all these things. But then I like the overlay of Rene Girard's work on mimetic desire on top of that.
Yeah.
And he talks about interdivisuality, like we're all
Yeah.
composed of other people's personalities and,
Yeah.
we're always imitative and all these things. So like, I think those two really jive well together. So,
That's
The
good.
unconscious is fascinating. By loving a person outside of yourself, you give yourself an image to move towards. And if you don't realize that's a part of psychology, you
yeah,
often internalize very, very bad perspectives.
that's right.
John one time was teaching meditation, and he was talking about like the voices that might come up, and are they yours? He said something like that. And it's like,
Yeah.
how creepy is that you might be guided by some idea that before you were rational or when you weren't paying attention became something you started to identify with. And so, yeah, the mimetic level of reality is really underexplored
Yeah.
in a lot of systems. Yeah, yeah.
And when
I
you
was
make
just,
it conscious, you find yourself like saying and doing gestures that I'm like, oh, I got that from my friend, or oh, I got that
yeah.
from him.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
so
Very much. I was talking with Dick Schwartz and Seth Allison, and yeah, and Dick Schwartz came up with internal family systems. And he was talking about, yeah, that we have the self is inherently uh, dialogical. I think the self is also an internal. I don't even know what I'm doing when I'm saying that now, actually, but it's an internal version of semiotic symbiosis. Things go and then they take on a life of their own, and that can be negative in parasitic processing, but it can also be like there's sort of I don't know, psychodynamic mitochondria are born in powerful ways. But one of the interesting things that came out of that was um, he was especially fascinated about my interactions with Hermes and things like that. And he said very, very clearly, he said, I'm writing a book right now about this. We've discovered after we're doing all these family system, like internal family therapy, that there's this other thing emerges. And he says, we call them guides. And they don't seem to be like the other parts that we're talking about. And I thought, oh my goodness, Neoplatonism is landing right inside of the parts work revolution. That's another part of the advent of the sacred, the parts work revolution that's just sweeping through therapy. But the idea that, yeah, but there are parts that well, they're transjective in nature. They're guides. And I thought that was very interesting, because it points to kind of what we're talking about here. Because I think we not only have if you'll allow me, Rob, to play with it a little bit, I don't think we just have the voices of other people now. I think we have the voices of other spirits. I think we have the voices of money, and I think we have the voices of, and so on and so forth in us. And
That's what
some
Hillman would say.
that's yes, very
Mhm.
excellent,
Mhm.
excellent connection. I think
Yeah, yeah.
Thomas Keaton would say that too, and that's very interesting to think about the degree to which, because like Rob says, one of the things that happen in deep meditation is you'll often discover that the voice that's talking in your head isn't your egocentric narrative voice. It's your mother's voice, it's your
Mhm.
father's voice. But since my experience with Hermes, I've become more sensitive to voices that aren't from my psychodynamic past, if I can put it that way. And that's been really interesting trying to figure out. And I hadn't thought about this as a possibility that, yeah, they're the internalizations of these transjective collective agents and intelligences. I mean, obviously it's Hermes because it's about the life of the meaning system, the semiotic system that we all swim around and in which we live and move and have our being.
Mhm.
But yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I wonder if that's the case. I wonder if some of Rob, you know Jung better than I. Is there any places where is there an archetype that comes up that is the voice of money? That
Yeah,
sounds
no,
really
there's been
cool.
gods of money for sure.
Yeah.
Even in Athens, the three gods that they had at one point were Athena, Hephaestus, and the god of luck. And so luck was like a coin a lot of times. It was very represented. And they have trading gods in other
Well,
cultures and stuff.
well,
Yeah.
that's the interesting thing because Hermes is also the god of merchants and trading, as well as the god of the meaning system, which like. I'm sorry, this is very intuitive for me, but I'm starting to see that it's interesting about the possibilities, like you were doing there, Rob, because like what's interesting, you were doing it this way, but I was seeing it this way, right? Which is
I
there's also
live that way this way, John.
yeah.
I'm at the Salvador Dali Museum staring at the most historically unique objects in Florida or whatever. And then I go to another museum full of paintings and meditation rooms. So yeah, yeah, I like both ways interpenetrated,
Well,
maybe.
well, our heads are, as I've argued, our heads are filled with the axial revolution. Our heads are filled with modernity, all the cognitive grammar, cultural cognitive grammar of modernity. And I'm wondering, do those structures, and like the way we've been talking about money here, do they ever show up as voices for people?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I think one of the like properties of symbols is they need to grab your attention almost irrationally, but they often want to speak to you in a way you can understand. So in your dreams, you'll be in a business room when it's an executive thing, or you'll be near watery places when it's very unconscious or whatever, or it'll be raining when you're not conscious of things that you should be grieving or sad about or whatever. And so they both are like coming from things more archaic, might be a kind of a third way Platonic term, but they're still trying to communicate like in a way you'll understand. So it makes sense that like Hermes might show up to you rather than like a Cerberus hound of hell or something, because your
Uh,
unconscious is trying to say, hey, let me show you some meaning and language or whatever. And that's why too the statues are like they are. When Freud met Dali, he was saying like, oh, the Greeks show these archaic patterns in their art, and they bring the unconscious to the conscious. And then Dali is almost inverting that. He's bringing this chaotic pre-conscious symbolism to his art, which is almost harder to do because you have to be so aporetic and technical at the same time. Whereas if you're super technical, you become, too modern. But if you're super irrational, you become like in this semiotic chaos and you can't, so um that was a bit of a rant. But I think and you can create these symbols or they'll just emerge in groups. Like that's the whole thing is like you might be trying to meditate with a group and then you do dialogos and then you're all surprised by what happens. And then,
yeah,
but
yeah,
what you
yeah,
hear
we're doing that. Yeah, we're doing it. We're
well,
trying to
but
create a
yeah, and then what you
metacognition.
hear is helpful, and it emerged from you, but not you, and others,
Always,
but
always.
not them. Yeah, so it's both intelligible, but it's like hyper rational.
So, Robert, I want to ask you a personal question then. I mean, have you ever dreamt of Bitcoin? Has it ever come to you? Uh, yeah,
That's a funny one. So let me, if I can may add to the last point there, and then I will
yeah,
answer that question. So I just,
sure.
as
Do
it
it.
was coming up, as you guys were having that exchange, do people hear voices that are money or other, maybe, maybe
Yeah.
non-personal things,
Because
non-person?
prophets, that's one of the jobs of a prophet. The prophet gives
Exactly.
voice to the large world, to the
Yes.
transjective, to the greater spirits that we're living in. Yes.
Yes. So I immediately was just thinking, I'm back to the imaginal, right? Where there's
Yeah.
that space
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in your mind that you do mental math or you
Yeah, yeah.
think or with money you do economic calculation. Again, as you always say, it's not a place, obviously, but it's not just irrational,
Yeah.
subjective nonsense
That's right.
because it's real. It gives you real grip on the real world. And so I wonder if well, even the metaphor you use, voices, it's
Yeah.
like, well, voices obviously are speaking to you in literacy. Maybe they
Yeah.
also speak to you in numeracy when you're doing mental math, or speak to you in,
Oh, that's
pricing or
interesting.
economic
Oh,
calculation. I know when I'm
oh,
like, when I just reflect on myself, I'm a mathematically minded guy, so I'm doing numeracy a lot. When I do my biohacking, my supplements, my spreadsheets, like I'm thinking in numbers often. So are the numbers speaking to me, or am I using them? Or they, it's like, I don't know
oh,
what's happening
yeah,
there.
yeah. That's very good.
And then money, you're using anytime you're planning on buying or investing or looking at a business deal or hiring people, negotiating compensation, like, well, you're all up in some money then too. So, anyways, that just thoughts that were coming to me. Like maybe it's an imaginal thing, these
No, no,
voices.
that's very good. I like that. That was helpful, Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about
The
the dream
dreaming.
question?
So, I don't think I've ever had a dream directly, specifically, explicitly about Bitcoin. Um, but I've had some pretty profound dreams, not often, but occasionally I do have them. And well, actually, my most popular essay, which was the number zero in Bitcoin, I've alluded to that several times today, the
Yeah,
Indo-Arabic numeral system.
yeah,
And I was in this place in my journey trying to understand money and what, incorruptible money, how significant it could be on
yeah.
civilization. And I was like, I'm looking for this historical allegory, like where's the example of this thing? And you end up in profound innovations like fire or the wheel.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
things that are really, really
Yeah.
transformative. And somehow the number zero came to me. I don't really know if it was a dream, an intuition. I don't know how. And then I start digging up these books on zero. Charles Seif's book was one of them. There's another one called
Yeah.
Finding Zero. There's a few others. And so, anyways, I don't know. That came to me in a dream or an intuition, and then I started doing
Oh, there you
research on it.
go. Yeah.
And then that became my most popular written work, which is just like the idea of an absolute. Like it's very paradoxical. The zero
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the number that is no number, or the
Yeah.
category for no categories, or
Yeah. Yeah.
you guys all I think it was in your conversation with Desmond where he identified this what can be no thing can also
Yeah.
be too much,
Yes.
like from
Yes.
the perspective
Yeah.
of a map.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so obviously nothing is zero, but it's also kind of like this symbol for humility in a way. Maybe it's like the
Yeah.
mathematical thing, like it's beyond what even mathematics can say anything about. There's like we can't
Yes.
say
Yeah.
anything about it. It's too much for mathematics. And so anyways, that got me into like again back to the map territory distinction, where like whatever the gap between the map and the territory is that absolute. It's the thing you can't really say anything about. It's either God or it's zero. And then, well, those things are absolute. They don't ever change. It's like the unexplored territory. Even when you explore more of it, well, there's still more unexplored territory,
Mhm.
right? The map is never the territory. So like no matter how much you explore and how much you map and how sophisticated you get, there's always more God or more zero or more unexplored territory. So it never changes.
That's why
And
loving is so
and
awesome
and
because
that's
I'm
why it's
sorry.
absolute. Just to complete the thought, is like
Yeah.
Yeah.
so it's absolute, doesn't change. And then the connection to Bitcoin is, oh, it's an absolute. We have an absolute fixed supply money,
Oh,
something that
I
doesn't
didn't. So
change.
thank you.
So
I
we
didn't.
discovered an
Yeah.
absolute with zero. We discovered one perhaps with Bitcoin. And then I guess if you went way backwards in time, maybe we discovered it with the idea of God, like a monotheistic
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
that there's just this absolute that we can never say, as Pajot would say, no matter what you say about God, you're wrong. It's
Yeah.
like that's exactly
But
right because the map is not
yeah.
the territory.
But you should never stop trying either. Zen
Exactly.
has something equivalent. You cannot find enlightenment by seeking, but only
Yeah,
seekers become enlightened.
exactly. Yes. So
Gentlemen, I need to go. This has been
Yeah. Yeah.
wonderful. It was it's always a pleasure to hang out with you, Rob. But Robert, you and I haven't done this for a while, and you know, caught fire for me, and I really appreciate it. So thank you very much. I just wanted to do one public service since people were watching this. And we were going to talk more about this. We didn't end up talking much about it, but Neoplatonism did keep coming up here and there. I just wanted to give people. There's a new book out, Neoplatonism: The Hidden Root of Everything You Believe, which is an excellent, very accessible introduction of Neoplatonism as a through line. And read this one first. And then if you want to start to go deeper about how it's a through line, there's this excellent book by Arthur Vervaeke, A Perennial Philosophy. This book first, then this, and then these two together can prepare you if you want to dig deeper. Because I really do think, I got it from him, Arthur Vervaeke, that Neoplatonism is the religious backbone, the religious and spiritual backbone of the Abrahamic West. And not only the Abrahamic West, of the Abrahamic and pagan West. So we should actually include because the pagan world was also knit into all of that. And I just wanted to just put that out there for people in case they wanted to say, okay, this is all right, but like, how do I start? What's a good way into all of this? I mean, I know Robert would also recommend economic stuff, and Rob has made a powerful case for organizational psychology. So I just wanted to do a little bit of advertising for Neoplatonism as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm always excited to talk to both of you guys. Thank you so much for doing this. It's a lot of fun. I literally, I actually get excited for these conversations. So thank
Yeah,
you.
me too.
Would you all do this again sometime? I know I wanted to do it in a more structured way, and then there was so much happening at the beginning that I didn't want to interrupt that with the format that I did. But would you be willing to do this
Sure. Do it again.
often? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
Okay,
got to
cool.
space things out, as you
Yeah, yeah,
know.
yeah.
But yeah. Well, I don't need an excuse to talk to Robert. I welcome it. I mean, Rob, you've reconnected me with Sevilla. You're, uh, you know, keeping my ongoing connection with Robert alive. I'm very grateful for this. Very
Good.
grateful.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Same here.
that's it's so good ideas are so powerful, and like the normative aspects of Austrian economics and Neoplatonism are so synergistic because the virtue, love, and the philosophical groundedness of Neoplatonism, uh, like you said, they influenced everyone from Aristotle, who influenced the West, to the three monotheisms and uh, the so many interesting books about the people that were talking with Plotinus that were Christians or that were reading Plotinus in the Arabic world. Or I'm still constantly surprised by people that reveal that they had a love of Plotinus hiding in their existential closet. So the power of the images and myths and ideas of the Platonists, and the dialogical method
Oh
of the
yeah, yeah.
Platonic dialogues and of Socrates, literally, um, are so much better than the modern or postmodern or nihilistic, solipsistic, I'm amazing demagoguery that's in the world. And yeah, you're both amazing people. I've had dreams of both of you at least once, and they've been reminders of aspects of reality that I want to move towards or wasn't paying enough attention to. So they weren't just like bad omens or something. I don't know. Yeah, very, very good.
We'll
Thank
stay
you
in
so
touch,
much.
both of you, please.
Yep. Also,
Great to
Robert,
see
do you
you
have like
guys.
5 minutes just to chat? Or do you have to get
Me?
going?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're the only Robert. I would say Robert too.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you're right. The Rob and Robert thing have got my brain twisted now.
It is
Okay.
a lot.
Well, I cottoned on that I would call Robert Gray Rob
Yes.
and Robert Breedlove Robert, because that's
Yeah,
typically how I talk to both of you. So
got it.
Yeah,
that worked better.
And my middle name's John. So there you go. There's that
There you
too.
go.
yeah.
That wouldn't help. Yeah. Take care, my friends.
Thank you,
Take care,
John.
John.
One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove.
Yeah, maybe even like a book club or something. Because I could get like Sevilla, or if you wanted to invite a friend, we could go through some of these Platonic texts or an Austrian book.
Yeah,
Um,
I would like to do that. I might need a little bit of time before I
yeah,
start
yeah, of course.
because obviously baby boy and we're also getting like pretty close on my book. I mean, we're at
Oh, I would
least
love to read that or talk about that.
yeah, we hit a draft by December. I think we're at like probably a month out from doing a second revision of the whole thing. But it's still, I don't know where books are supposed to be by this stage, but it feels like we still have some structural things to do. So I don't really know how many revisions we're going to go through. So it's hard for me to say like where we're at and
Yeah,
percentage
yeah.
complete. But I would like to get that to like a pretty late stage before I start making other commitments.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
But I do, I mean, I would love, I have a whole men's retreat. We were doing a book club together, so like 30 guys.
Oh,
And
nice.
I don't know that I'm not saying they would all participate in this, but just they might get value out of it, even just us doing it and giving them the recordings and
Yeah, yeah, no,
yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
It's uh yeah, it's all super interesting because it's so fun to go through a text with other people that are really passionate and bring stuff.
Mhm.
And um yeah, yeah. And you have a child and all this stuff
Oh
happening. So
wow.
it's not
Yeah.
urgent for sure.
But I love Sevilla. I love Persig. I I draw on Persig a lot in the book too. I think the dynamic quality thing is another one of these primordial presuppositions, and he's just putting it in new language. And so again, it's another thing we thread back to Mises and the axiom of action. And he's again describing dynamic quality. It's neither objective nor subjective. And
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah. No, participation is a kind of the Neoplatonic word, and it's like
Mhm.
you participate in eating. You don't
Mhm.
propositionalize to
Right.
ingest food. You
Yeah.
participate in a concert. That's a really like an awesome
Right.
and relatable example because you don't have to know all the facts about,
Right.
who's playing. You just
Right.
need to like what they're doing. And in fact,
Yeah.
if you're I remember one time I was with some friends and they were really into Dragon Ball Z in high school, and I was like hanging out, and I kept asking them questions about what does that mean? Why are they doing that? Why are they? And they were like, "Get out of here, man! We don't want you and your intellect trying to figure
Mhm.
everything out. We've been into this, and now we're enjoying watching it happen."
Yeah.
And in my yoga practice, they have this idea of Jisoo and Gosu, and so Jisoo is like theory, and then Gosu is like action. And
Mhm.
like they explicitly try to have half of each. And so if you're
Yeah.
doing something very cognitive, pay
Yeah.
attention to your posture
Yeah.
and what you're, but if you're doing something very like metaphysical, it's
Hmm.
like, or very embodied. It's like, oh, do that mindfully, do that with
Yeah.
purpose, do that while you're visualizing and
Right.
stuff like that. And if they disconnect, they become kind of tragic
Yeah.
uh and the academic world is so it just rewards ideas, and so your moral
Yeah.
character, how you engage with your body and stuff like that, they don't matter. and,
Yeah.
and then the opposite is also kind of true. It's like it would be so frustrating to try and explain kind of grounded Austrian theory to someone that's like, no, money is a social construct, or
Yeah.
or I believe all blah, it's like, oh my gosh, it's going to take me 20 hours and
Right.
your goodwill to get
Yeah.
us to get you to see something in a more uh rational, actionable way. And but yeah, no, I would love to do some book clubs, or have you talk to some Platonist friends. I'm like John was
Yeah.
kind of saying, I'm in this sweet spot where I have a lot of social interests and in the background to talk to someone that knows
Yeah.
Austrian economics and
Right.
Neoplatonism. And uh and
So
I
I would
just
love,
love it. Yeah.
yeah, no, I also love to talk about it for sure. I am still putting out one podcast episode a week. So I try to do like one conversation a week. And if it's not, it's either me solo or talking to a guest, or it could be like one of these recordings.
Uh-huh.
So I would love it. First of all, if you don't mind, like if this recording is available, I would love to release this on our channel.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then
100%.
for future conversations that you think I'd be a good fit for, please send me the invite. And
Yeah,
as long as we
especially if
can
you
put
had
it,
a
if we can put it
yeah,
on
yeah.
our channel, that's like kind of two birds, one stone for me. It's like, well, I
Yeah,
get to
yeah.
come have a fun conversation and I get to not
100%.
get something for work. So,
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
me in
And
mind.
if you had philosophical issues you wanted to explore, I know more Platonists than almost anyone on earth. I got to have
Yeah.
lunch with the head of the Cambridge Platonists in Cambridge a couple months ago. I met like most of the Platonists that John met and talked for at Harvard.
Right.
In 2 weeks, I'm going to a conference with this friend who has this AI that's like a Socratic, Platonic AI that these
Mhm.
these academics are building. And yeah, I'm so I would love to do that. So if you had questions, you go, oh, I've
Yeah.
been I read Plotinus or this book that John recommended, and I'm really
Yeah.
confused about these things, or I would just like to know more. Those would
Yeah.
be super fun podcasts. And like the people that I'm talking about are effortlessly brilliant because instead of caring about money, they just care
Right.
about like theology or whatever,
Right.
and they love philosophizing. So they
Yeah.
would probably be very effortless in saying like, "Oh, did you think of this?" or "What about Schelling?" or "What about, this
Yeah.
follower of Plotinus or whatever."
No, that would
So,
be awesome. And the other thing I do with those is I take the files and I transcribe them and I
yeah,
feed that
yeah,
into our AI for our book. And it's like, hey,
yeah,
here's
yeah.
more, more fodder basically. And
No,
yeah,
it's
I don't,
amazing. Yeah.
I, well, I don't know. I'll just always try to come and be thoughtful. Basically, I don't really, I don't have an agenda. Of course, I'm trying to learn. Of course, I have questions. Of course, I mean, my agenda, I guess you could say, is like I am trying to make this thesis of like, hey, I think the axiom of action is connected to all these primordial presuppositions. Have you thought about that? And so that's like the avenue I'm coming at it from. But
Yeah,
I
yeah. No, I
really,
love that
I
because
really
action is
think that,
underappreciated by philosophers. Like
yeah,
they
but
could benefit from
yeah,
you too.
yeah. And then the thing in the book, and like this is, there's a lot of challenges and things we're doing, but one of the real final filters for us is that do these ideas cash out? It's like I don't want to just sit here like I'd love to philosophize and talk about all these things, but like I don't want that in the book. I want only the things that like really cash out in your life and change the way you show up and think and do, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
That's kind of
yeah.
our final filter. So I love to have conversations about that, like especially with philosophers that are way off in the deep end. It's like, all right, can you tell me how that like cashes out in real life?
That's why I
And so,
like the virtue aspect because especially if you have a more transjective view of what virtue is, and it's like,
mhm,
oh, I'm harmonizing with my environment, or I'm
mhm,
transcending it towards a new mysterious direction that's better than the old way. I didn't bring it
mhm,
up today, but like there's a architectural theory called prospect refuge, and
mhm,
animals, children in their drawings, people in their home building and stuff like that, they often put these two elements of prospect, like a big open vista, and refuge, like a cave behind you. And then the
mhm.
Platonists and some of the ancient Stoics and Epicureans and stuff, and John as well, have this idea of ataraxia. And so
Yeah,
ataraxia is like a philosophical version of that. It's like, oh, I want to be free of worry. So I need
yes,
to actually acknowledge and deal with my angers, my anxieties, my fears, my
yeah,
loneliness, whatever.
yeah.
And that's not enough because then I'll actually get bored if I just have like
Mhm,
freedom from problems. I need
mhm.
opportunities that maybe fit my personality or move me towards
Yes.
virtue and stuff. And that's trickier than coming up with a really coherent theory that you can talk about on YouTube because moving people away from addictive behavior or internalized anxiety or loneliness towards being a new kind of person,
Mhm.
or just radically changing your life, like some Zen people. They'll just like they're the 33rd patriarch of Zen was this illiterate guy. He heard, I think, the Diamond Sutra while he was out
Wow.
one day, and then it changed him so much that he was then handed the baton to be the next in the lineage. And so it's like
Mhm.
that's a radical metanoia that
Yes.
you don't really necessarily get from like, Joe
Right.
Rogan or whoever
Right.
you want to name as your guru, your online guru. Yeah, so I'm very, and that's why I love applied psychology and stuff too, because it
Yeah.
it it, it has the feedback of the real world that often the intellectual world doesn't have.
Yes.
Um,
And that's our express purpose in the book is to induce metanoia, basically. Like we
yeah,
want the
yeah.
kid, the title of the book's The Right Way to Make Money. So we want someone to open the book and be like, oh, I want to know how to make money. Like that is never thought more than two just thought that basically. Who just stopped there. Like someone that just wants to make money has never had a single philosophical thought in his life. And then we're like, all right, we're going to do that, but we got to take you like into the weeds, so to speak, into philosophy. But then I want to make sure that all of those ideas cash out along the way. And so by the end of the book, they're like a praxeologist, a philosopher into virtue ethics, deeper knowledge about language, psychology, incentives, all of these things. So it's
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah. No, you want to be a
metanoia
Trojan
for
horse that makes people want to
yes,
live better, not just like have ideas that they brag about or whatever.
100%. 100%. It's like an indirect orange pilling, basically.
Yeah, no, I want to do similar things because I want to like get some of my philosopher friends to start making more public art and doing like uh I would love to have a new Platonic Academy or something like that where people
Mhm.
during COVID there was this thing called the Stoa. Do you know Peter
Mhm.
Limburg or this? Yeah, so
Mhm.
like I went to all sorts of things there. And John did a 100-day meditation thing, which I did. He did another like 40-day thing, which I did. I started doing these philosophical practices every week, sometimes like 2 or 3 or 4 days a week. And all of a sudden, I'm just having mystical experiences all the time. And then
Mhm.
I got Japanese yoga. It's a nice complete philosophy that it's really into simplicity. It has principles that ground everything that you can just apply, but it
Mhm.
also has practices, so it's not just conceptual, nor is it like blind faith trust. Like this workout works, bro.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and it's great because once you have that, that frees you up to then live well. If you're
Mhm.
always just going from new idea, being
Yeah.
disappointed, grabbing another new idea, or just checking out, that
Yeah.
kind of sucks. If you can go like, oh, I found a way to meditate and now I have more freedom of mind, or I
Mhm.
did this therapy, like depth therapy, and now I can like experience my feelings and go behind my old
Yeah.
self-image or whatever it is, or even again, like I'd love to do a series on like weightlifting philosophers because I
Yeah.
have two friends that I'm visiting plus
Yeah.
you and people like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, how fun would it be to have
Yeah.
like the sounds of weights stacking and little like
Uh-huh.
cut scenes and
Yeah.
then go, what is beauty? And then,
Yeah. Yeah.
like those kind of things, because then it's not either or, it's much
Yeah.
more both and. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I have a lot to say about that. I think because we're all products of our environment, and a lot of my philosophy, I can find ways to tie it to the weight room or to weight training or to
Well, but
athleticism.
yeah, but the weight room is a good example because it is normative. If you
Yeah.
actually like do a thing
And it's a
for,
fruit of capitalism.
what do
It's
you
like
mean?
who, well, like it's a luxury. Like our lives are so good that I need to go to this air-conditioned, beautiful place to like lift resistance to make sure my body doesn't atrophy.
Oh yeah,
Whereas like
yeah,
if
yeah.
we weren't in this lap of luxury, I'd be working on the farm 18 hours a day, Like that would be
Well,
my
that's the
gym.
irony of the modern world, and Japanese yoga was designed to do that too. Because, like, if you don't take care of your health and you sit all day, or you're not moving implicitly, you will atrophy and get sick.
Yeah.
And if and
Yeah.
100%, that's yeah. I think mind, body, soul, and like
Yeah.
other people, and maybe the
Yeah.
environment. If you had a fifth thing,
Yeah.
like if you're able to engage with all of those well, you're going to be so happy.
Exactly. 100%.
Well,
See, I
sweet.
say
Oh, go ahead,
keep me in
please.
mind. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
happy to
likewise.
record and happy to um yeah, happy to have conversations. And then when the book gets to like a mature place, I don't really know what that means yet, but like a place where I'm like, hey, this is something I actually want to share with people. Like you're top of the list, so I'll send it to
Awesome.
you. I think I owe you still an essay. You shared with me an essay, right? That
Oh
you
yeah,
wrote?
yeah, totally. You can. I'll resend it. You can don't worry about it or any of that
No,
stuff.
please resend it. And I apologize I haven't gotten to it yet. It's not like me, but life has been quite
No, for sure.
tumultuous the past 13 months, so I'm doing my best to roll with the punches. But now I'm a little more stable at the moment, at least, so I can give it a read.
Cool. Yeah. No, definitely. That'd be great. And yeah, we'll just keep when it fits and when it makes sense, do stuff like this. And yeah, I had the greatest time. I love just seeing John excited. I
Me
love.
too.
Yeah, I feel like most of my life is just kind of like following the good ideas and
Yes.
transcending the dumb ideas. Um,
Yeah.
I have probably more mystical experiences than most people will have in their entire life, like weekly. I can't even remember the last day I didn't feel union with the universe at
Amazing.
all. Well, I
Yeah.
practiced a lot. I studied training and I was really into just like kind of wisdom stuff. And that's why I liked Austrian stuff because it makes so much more
Yeah.
sense. Oh, the environment changes. I need to care about it. It's not
Yeah.
arbitrary and but I love sharing this, and I hope to eventually get into a PhD program and then like teach it or
Mm,
stay at this level and network people and do stuff
yeah,
like that. So, um,
amazing.
yeah,
Well, I don't know that I'm at that level, but man, I got a lot of gratitude every day for the little things. And
that's
I'm,
just as good.
as I said at the top of the show, like that life that I imagined, like I live it now. And so I'm so grateful every day. It's amazing. I mean, of course I have stresses and all the things, but it's overall amazing. So
There's always stress. That's one of the hardest
yeah.
things to deal with once you're successful is like stay humble and like not get frustrated at other things. But
Yeah.
no, and it's an intelligible world that you live in. It didn't just like, it's not like the book of Job where it's like, life is unfortunate. Now it's fortunate. Now it's
Yeah.
unfortunate. You're like,
Right.
oh, I trust these ideas and I move towards them
Yeah.
and it's better. So
Yeah, for sure. And so yeah, let's keep it up.
awesome. I love it. Yeah. All
Awesome,
right,
dude.
Robert. It was so good to hang out with you today.
Good to see you again, man.
All right.
Talk soon. And do you go by Rob typically then?
Yeah, Rob's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
I'll call you Rob
Awesome.
then.
Yeah.
Good to
Tell
see
your
you,
wife I
Rob.
said hi. Yeah.
I will.
Awesome.
See ya.
We lock our doors, we encrypt our hard drives, and we use strong passwords. But most people leave one thing wide open: their phone line. SIM swap attacks are one of the fastest growing methods of digital theft. In minutes, a hacker can clone your accounts, reset your passwords, and drain your life. Unfortunately, this is not science fiction. It happens every single day. Afani is the only mobile service protection designed exclusively to protect you from SIM swap attacks. Afani offers military-grade encryption on their product and offers up to $5 million of SIM swap insurance. And to date, there have been exactly 0 SIM swaps on any of Afani's over 50,000 protected accounts. So you don't need to live in fear, you just need to protect your weakest link. Go to afani.com/breedlove to secure your phone line today. Again, that's Afani, EFANI.com/breedlove. For the past 25 years, I've been reading roughly one book per week. Almost entirely difficult nonfiction books, the kind that really shift your thinking. Books on physics, money, power, psychology, spirituality, and philosophy. The real stuff. But I get it. Most people don't have time to read 50 books per year. So I hand-selected my favorite nonfiction books and distilled each one of them into a course that you can take in 50 to 100 times faster than it would take you to read the entire book. Each course gives you the key insights, mental models, and frameworks that matter. We launched with 15 book courses, and we are building toward a library of 100 by the end of year 1. So if you are a seeker of truth, wisdom, and personal growth, then my book course is for you. To sign up, go to course.breedlove.io. Again, that's course.breedlove.io. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money. And be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.